Welcome to Mr. Podcast with Claude.
And Justin.
We have returned with Twin Peaks: The Return. Oh, wait, it's not The Return anymore.
No, it's not called that now.
Oh, it's Twin Peaks, what's it called now?
In fact, it was never called that. I think it's Twin Peaks: A Limited Event Series.
Wait. I clearly, distinctly remember watching a series called Twin Peaks: The Return.
No, anything you remember about that is just the timeline altered.
Oh my god, the timeline's altering?
Yeah, the timeline's altering.
That sounds like a key plot twist in Mark Frost's latest book. Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier.
The final dossier. There won't be any more dossiers after this one.
There's no more dossiers.
Tammy's done.
Tammy's done with this. Tammy has amnesia by the end of this.
Tamnesia.
Amnesia. That's the follow-up. There's no more dossiers, but there's Tamnesia, starring Tammy Preston as a headstrong FBI agent. Can't quite remember the past. Was her boss sexually harassing her behind her back?
Gordon, did you tell me to think about something? I don't remember.
I remember something about a spiritual and some sort of body part. Is it the spiritual
Sounds like
foot?
me, Tammy!
Hey, Tammy, I want you to do a bunch of work and put it in a book, will ya? I want to investigate some stuff I should probably be investigating myself.
I'm not gonna read it, though. I don't read books.
There's only one book I need, Tammy. Yeah, this whole...
be?
Yeah, okay, so we're riffing or something. I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I don't know what that is.
what the technical word is. But
Yeah.
we are technically recording a podcast, and this podcast subject is Mark Frost's new book, Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Closest
we're
thing
talking
to
about
new
that.
Twin Peaks that we will probably get for a very long
Yeah.
time.
And the thing we were talking about before, if our listeners haven't heard, is that apparently there's a little story that came out that the sort of marketing of Twin Peaks: The Return, which is what we called it, us and everyone else in the world, while it was airing, was just a sort of Showtime thing and not what the creators had actually intended it to be referred to as. So like what's coming out on Blu-ray is now, what is it? Twin Peaks: A Limited Edition series?
A limited event series.
A limited event series.
Yeah.
Sorry. Limited event.
Please.
This event won't last forever.
Like
limited.
other events that last forever.
Yeah, most events, as we know, most events last forever.
That's really disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be disturbing forever because it's an event.
You don't want to go to that event because it's an event, so it's going to last forever.
Mm-hmm. But this isn't like that. This is limited.
Limited, right. Yeah. Which is good, because I, as much as I enjoyed, many elements of it, I wouldn't want it to go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would probably get taxing at a certain point.
Like this intro.
Exactly.
Okay, so you read the previous dossier.
Correct.
The penultimate dossier.
Yes. I will specify that for this and the final dossier, I actually listened to the audio book version.
Okay.
The Secret History of Twin Peaks was read by a multifaceted cast. Is that the right word? I don't know. A larger cast, which included some, actual cast members from the show.
Mm-hmm.
They had Kyle MacLachlan was on there, and the guy who plays Hawk, Michael Horse, and the guy who plays Hank, like, even got in there to like narrate this like deathbed like note, like, because they basically, he killed off Hank in Secret History. He got like shivved in prison by some Renault cousin or something.
Oh, you said Hank. Oh man, I thought you said Harry, and I was like, wow,
Oh
that's
yeah.
interesting. He decided to like come out of retirement for that.
Yeah, no on Keen. He didn't show up. But yeah, they brought him in, and there's probably some others I'm forgetting, but they also had like just like the voice actors playing some of the characters. Like Gordon Cole has a voice that isn't David Lynch, and Tammy is voiced by someone who isn't Krista Bell, who played her in the show, and the same woman who did her in Secret History of Twin Peaks is doing all of the narration for the final dossier, because it's all from her. Like, she's pretty much, except for the Albert thing at the beginning, the little report about Leo's autopsy, it's all just what Tammy wrote.
Yeah. As witnessed by Tamara.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's only one voice for the final dossier. But anyway, yeah, that's the format. So I didn't actually read the text version. I think it was probably different, especially for Secret History. Like, the books are extremely different. I mean, I think at various points when we were doing the podcast, I alluded to the fact that the Secret History is, like as the series went on and as the series ended, it was just very questionable what was going on with the Secret History. Like, and the final dossier doesn't really clear that up. There are some vague, brief references to things from Secret History, but it's sort of like all of those ideas were abandoned, like just as much as they were in the series. And it's sort of like it seems like Mark Frost like had this sort of X-Files-esque like historical government conspiracy alien book he wanted to write. And he just kind of tried to squeeze that into a Twin Peaks story. Because it just doesn't. Whereas this book, I mean, as much as it's, I don't know, it's like, it's weird in a lot of ways, but it's definitely directly connected to Twin Peaks. Every single chapter is directly connected to Twin Peaks. So that makes it a completely different experience. A lot of that was like, really, is the new season going to be about like Richard Nixon and like, like UFOs and stuff? Like, it was just like, it was bizarre. There was a lot of stuff about the ring. None of that really came into play either. I mean, basically nothing from the book mattered. I mean, there were a few minor things that sort of came up, but it's weird because it mattered a lot less for the show, but it does seem like it was longer. It seems like more thought was put into it. Like, it was all these found documents. That's part of the reason they had multiple voice actors, because like, it wasn't just Tammy's take on things, which she specifically says at the beginning of the final dossier, like, this isn't going to be like the last one.
Yep.
I'm just gonna, give my summary of things, instead of producing the original documents and then making commentary, and that's what the original is like. So it seems like there was more time spent on Secret History, but it was also just way less connected to Twin Peaks, and this feels more like, I guess the vibe I get from it is a little bit like the thing at the end of Lost, the new man in charge. I mean, it's not really the same, because like, the main difference is that this is kind of filling in gaps in like from the old series to the new series. Like, that's a lot of what it's doing.
Yeah. And
in the case of Lost, there was no old and new series. There was just one series, but it was like kind of addressing certain like holes or certain like unresolved plot elements.
Yeah.
And so that's what this kind of felt like kind of cleanup from like, well, here's some things that like weren't addressed at all that seemingly needed to be addressed. You would think.
It did come across like a laundry list of, here's some, what will we say to clean up, or a final word about this thing or this idea, and but the problem is, of course, there's two problems really with sort of, I mean, not really a problem, but just what makes getting that information problematic, I should say, is is A, it's from Tammy's perspective,
Yeah, that's a
and it's her
problem.
interpretation, and B, she's losing her mind by the end.
Right.
So it calls into question everything else.
It does. Yeah.
So you go, so even if you get an interesting answer about something or a theory about something from her explanation, it's kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? This is just, this is couched in this being her limited perspective, her
Right.
limited perspective.
Right. 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 It's a serious limitation. Because she barely visited Twin Peaks at the very very end of the series,
Yeah.
and so she wasn't there obviously for the original series. What was she, like 5 or something? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's no, so it's all like, what she researched, and she does reference like some of the things that happened later in the series. Like, I think the most interesting elements for me were her perspective on like what happened in the sheriff's station.
Yep,
You
that was
know,
huge. That was really, really huge.
because like that wasn't clear from the actual show, like how they perceive that, and it's also kind of inconsistent.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, like I've caught like several inconsistencies with the new series, and it's like, how the fuck did that happen?
Yeah, it makes it seem like much like the Secret History had like those discrepancies about what happened in the original
With the
series.
old series, yeah.
Yeah, it was like that, where it's like, oh, wait a minute, you're giving me your perspective from this scene, but that's not really what happened. Notably, like Diane
Diane
just
is
magically appearing in the cell, and it's kind of like, wait a minute. First of all, she didn't like appear there, and also she was Naito at the time.
no mention of
Uh,
that.
no clear.
It made me wonder. It made me wonder when Mark Frost wrote this, and if there were rewrites or something. You
Huh.
know, like, because I know. I mean, I just wonder what the timeline is, because there was that behind the scenes information that at a certain point, Mark Frost went off to write The Secret History, which clearly would have been before this, and David Lynch continued writing stuff for the series. And so I started wondering if like the original conception for what happened with Diane was different, and Naito wasn't even in the original script, and like maybe the idea was she was going to appear in the sheriff's station or something, and like the way it's narrated is actually how it was supposed to be, and then he
Wow, that's
changed
interesting.
it.
Yeah, huh.
It's the only theory I could come up with, because why wouldn't he know? I mean, if he, what I mean, if he saw the show, like, why wouldn't he acknowledge what's obviously in the show? I mean, it's one thing when it's the original series.
Well, my thought was it has something to do with the nature of those circumstances, where they're remembering things differently.
You think it's like the timeline change thing?
The timeline change, or the whole concept of Naito, like once Diane stopped being
Mm-hmm.
Naito, it did something to the history of Naito,
Mm-hmm. They just
and
didn't remember that was a thing.
yeah, like that's how it came off to me. Of
Yeah.
like it was
It's
sort of
interesting though, like she does mention Freddy
hmm
briefly,
hmm
you
Oh,
know.
and also she's very vague about Bob. She doesn't really specify
True.
that it's a guy's head and a ball.
True.
It's very like sort of vague in how she's sort of describing it, which makes it seem like the Naito thing, where there's some idea there of like these supernatural things, are make weird impressions in your mind or something.
Yeah. They're not coming across like seemingly to the people in the
Yeah,
world.
I guess even analogous to how the woodsmen blink in and out of, and she sort of did sort of say it that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
recanting when Hastings got killed by the
Yeah.
woodsman, that it's I forgot what she said now. Sort of the line was something like, sort of before their eyes and not, he was killed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember the exact
Well,
line,
but that's an interesting alternative idea, though, that it could just be a production issue.
Yeah. It's just like, it seems so, I don't know, a lot of the stuff she was saying seems consistent, but the thing with Diane made me think there was some rewriting there, because I think it's referenced that it's Cooper and Gordon at the Great Northern. you know? And
Yes,
I
she didn't mention with Diane disappearing too.
yeah, like, well, Diane does disappear, but like separately.
Yeah, that's what I mean. She didn't when she says Gordon and Cooper disappears. She doesn't say Diane went with them.
Yeah.
In yeah,
So
and
that made me
her
think there was a
description of
different
the
version.
and I think some of that's maybe become second or third hand even because like when she talks about the boiler room door that Cooper
Mm-hmm.
goes into they describe it as like this infinite hallway or something
Mm-hmm.
which isn't an idea I would have that was interesting to me that they thought of it that way
Mm-hmm.
that they even saw enough of it to have an impression like that
Yeah.
they didn't just think it was a dark room that he walked
Yeah,
into.
I didn't think they really saw that much of it
Yeah, so I
either.
thought that was
Yeah.
interesting that they're giving us some information about what that was. It's
Yeah.
kind of it reminded me of the sort of walkway in the which where and I guess that's the idea maybe is in the convenience store.
Yeah.
Walk
Yeah.
across and that's sort of an I guess infinite hallway thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they cross like a similar way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is the idea. But yeah, the fact that she doesn't mention that Diane was there, it just I don't know. That was like I don't know, maybe there is an explanation, but it just seems so I don't know. It's one of those things where I just wonder what the timeline was. If he had actually when he wrote it, if he had actually seen what the final version of the series was.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I mean this thing was published October 31st, I believe, and or 30th. I don't know, 28th. That's okay. I'm just making shit up. Anyway, it was the end of October, and the the final episode, 2 episodes. The part where we actually see that stuff. I mean, that aired at the beginning of September. Surely he would have delivered the book before that. And I'm kind of wondering if he actually saw, you know what I mean? If he actually saw it and maybe he didn't know that like certain changes had been made.
Mm-hmm.
It just because I know he wasn't on set the whole time, and I know rewrites are done, separately, and so yeah, it's just it's but I mean I have no way of knowing what the deal is with that.
Well, does Mark Frost have Twitter?
So well he does. He does. I
Think
asked
it's
him a
Swedish
question
and
on Twitter. I forgot what it was though. He didn't respond. He gets a lot of requests. But yeah, I think it's it's hard to know what to think about this stuff, and there's certainly the question of how canon it is anyway. I mean, what does canon mean? Twin Peaks already has a bunch of tie-in books from the old days, like the Secret Diary, the My Life, My Tapes, the what's it called, All Access Guide or something like that. There's those tie-in things where stuff happens in there that's not necessarily consistent with the series, or Fire Walk with Me or whatever. It's kind of like not really clear how to take that stuff if you wanna admit it or not. And of course the series is not necessarily consistent with itself, so it's like it starts to get a bit confusing about how to take things. But at the very least, it does seem like it's Mark Frost's perspective to some extent.
I think this is what Mark Frost thinks Tammy thinks.
Yeah.
Which is something.
Which is something.
What I was going to say earlier is, what would have been a better final dossier is Gordon writing it.
Right.
Think about the insights you could get from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so one thing that really stood out to me is that Tammy never mentions the monologue. So there's a whole chapter on Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's like really extensive or really clear, but there is a whole chapter on Judy. And Tammy never mentions the fact that Gordon delivers a whole monologue where he talks about this idea of Judy that Cooper found out about it. Briggs and he and Cooper had this plan to go find Judy, right? And then it's sort of implied that that's what Cooper's doing at the end of the series, or at least that was the plan. That's some aspect of what he's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She doesn't reference that. She talks about Judy like it's a brand new thing. Mm-hmm. You know, she doesn't. She's even addressing Gordon in this final dossier, and she doesn't mention. So again, I started to wonder about rewrites because it's just weird. You know, it's weird that she's not like, you told me that Cooper had this plan, and so I assumed that what he was doing had something to do with this plan to find Judy. Like, he does, you know what I mean? It's not addressed in that way.
Yes, and she sort of talks about Judy as if he doesn't know what he told her in that monologue.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like she doesn't acknowledge it at all. And so I don't know. The thing I asked Mark Frost about is that the book does seem to confirm that Mr. C was at the meeting with Briggs, Ruth, and Hastings and the Woodsman. At least like Tammy thinks he was.
Yeah, I want to talk about that when we get to that chapter, because I felt like there was even a discrepancy in that event.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Because isn't it like he's not there one moment, and then the next moment he's there?
That's pretty much what happened. Yeah.
Which is like sort of what happened in the show. So it was weird to see that, you know, in the book too, like this idea that like, wait, is he there the whole time or not? Like, did he kill her or not? Like, you know, it was weird.
She partially said he did, and partially no. So but the fact that she even said that he might have been there was progress from what was in the show, where it was never stated. And it always seemed, I mean, the whole time, anyone who listened to the podcast knows, like, that was a constant thing that I was, like, frustrated by and never really resolved. And, you know, in terms of Mr. C's mission, which she, you know, like, at least references the idea that he had a mission. Mm-hmm. And she gives us, you know, some of her take on aspects of the mission, but she doesn't really know what the mission was. In the end, she's like, well, he was trying to get somewhere.
Yeah, she almost gets there, which is an interesting goal, I think. Like, and I don't quite buy it, but this idea that, you know, he's the billionaire, you know, he's some sort of criminal mastermind who, over the course of the last couple decades, he sort of amassed this, like, you know, massive fortune and his international conspiracies, and with the goal, I think, and this is the part she didn't actually lay out, but I think so the jump is, you know, because we know he builds the machine, you know, presumably to catch Judy, so builds the box, so maybe the idea there is, he wants to find Judy. He needs basically all of this money to create this technology, to do this thing, to find this ultimate evil or power, or whatever he's trying to get.
Yeah.
You know, so the money is sort of a means to an end,
right? And
not like he just wants to be rich and he wants to sort of be a criminal, which is the part I don't really like, because it's just sort of boring. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I just want to have a yacht and, like. You know, it's kind of
I
like...
want to have a palazzo.
Really, doppelganger? You're spending your time, like, partying on a yacht? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit much.
I'd rather it's like, it's a means to an end, and because he's trying to, you know, get enough money to build this machine, which, you know, they did a good job. You know, there's all those shots of the box in the beginning, you know, that it makes it look like this isn't your ordinary, you know, experiment. You know,
definitely.
This is something different, you know, so I could
no
imagine...
pun intended.
What was the pun?
Experiments.
Oh. Well, literally no pun intended. I didn't catch it. This is the experiment model, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I thought that's sort of interesting. Take on that whole thing, and I guess I guess that's why, he had the Palazzo in Argentina or whatever.
Yeah.
I still don't know quite why he needed the information from Albert about the FBI agent there. What that really?
Yeah. It's not clear at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Does she reference that? Is that referenced in the book?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, there's some. But yeah, I agree. The whole Judy Pat. I didn't really think of that when I read it, but you're totally right. The whole Judy chapter here is written like Gordon doesn't know anything about Judy.
Exactly.
He's never really heard of this because she has all this background research.
Yeah, and it's like he told you. There's even this thing about Philip Jeffries, writing, Jowdy or whatever. And it's like, you heard about this. Like, I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, and there's some retconning, too, with that whole idea.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Definitely. They were trying to, fill in those Philip Jeffries gaps from the motel or the hotel thing.
I think there's a line where she talks about Philip Jeffries and, just to sort of go back to the idea that it wasn't written, from someone who's like seen that scene where he talks about the whole Blue Rose Task Force and that Jeffries was the leader. Because I feel like she references him being important with it, but like not that he was the leader.
True. Yeah.
And that's the thing, though. Oh, okay, that seems a little bit different.
But at the same time, she does talk about Hastings. She talks about the sheriff station from Part 17. So it's clearly, those things must have happened by the time she's writing this stuff.
Yeah, and she mentions a couple times there was about 20 witnesses there, which I laughed at because that just means there were 20 people in that room. Like, that's a lot of people in one room.
It is.
I'll never forget the tell of that I knew something was weird with that scene when they cut to Frank's office, and I'm like, my first thought is, wow, Frank has a big office. Like it's already like unusual that I'm like, this is just this one shot. I'm like, this is a pretty big office. And then they have the other shot, and you see how big it is. I'm like, wow, this is a huge room.
Yeah.
And then, and the entire cast shows up by the end.
Yeah, there was a lot of floor space.
Yeah.
It was kind of ridiculous. He was able to sit at his desk while the whole thing was going down.
He didn't even have to stand up.
Yeah.
Just he had a great view. It was like, wow. Oh man. But yeah, it's interesting, how to sort of think about these discrepancies, especially when she's giving her firsthand account of things and she's wrong.
Yeah. So I don't know if you caught this. This was something that it's a minor thing, but it sort of bothered me. And I don't know if you actually got to this part because I don't even remember what part this was in. At one point, she says that Cooper went to the hospital after. So this is way back season 2, after he slammed his head into the mirror.
Yep. They said, I believe they said Doc Hayward took him to the hospital.
But I believe later in the book, she actually says he stayed in bed all day in his room after that. I believe it's contradicted.
I did not catch that.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, you're not even consistent with your own book. Jesus.
Do you remember where that was?
I don't. It could have been in so many places. It was in a totally different section of the book.
Yeah.
I do remember that, when they go back to it. Because it could have been in so many places, because it's kind of relevant to Annie, it's relevant to Audrey, potentially. Any of the stuff talking, it could have been later in the stuff about,
It's in the Annie part. I didn't read the Annie part yet.
Yeah, it could be in the Annie part.
Yeah.
Because...
Which I'm surprised she even had a chapter.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll just, briefly explain the Annie stuff. So the weird thing about Secret History that we talked about on the podcast is that, it gives this whole background for Norma where they talk about her parents and her mother died, you know, 3 years or something before the series even started, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, that's so not true. Did you see the series? Like, there's a whole thing about Norma's mother being a food critic, and even when Annie comes, you know, they reference her specifically.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, none of that mentions Annie. Annie was not mentioned at all in Secret History, and you know that's one of the reasons why. You know, the whole time I was like skeptical about whether she would play any role or make any kind of appearance in the series, which you know definitely turned out to be almost true, even though she does get at least referenced at a certain point, briefly, as briefly as possible, basically, like once. Um, and they don't even say that she's Norma's sister. So it was sort of like, what's the deal? And like, and the question I had about that whole thing is like, when they're doing this investigation that goes nowhere, it doesn't matter, but never mind that. Why didn't they contact Annie? You know, why are you contacting Doc Hayward? You know, to talk about this situation when Annie went into that place with Cooper. You know, surely she might have something to say about what her experience was that might be more insightful than what Doc Hayward knows, you know? And so I was just like, why are you not even bringing up the idea of contacting Annie? So, you know, I think the final dossier pretty much addresses both of those questions or both of those issues, like, directly. Basically by saying, first of all, that Norma and Annie are half sisters, and that Vivian was Annie's mother from an affair that her father, Norma's father, had with her. And so Norma's mother was a different person, so they were half sisters. And I guess Norma's father left Norma's mother and went to be with Annie's mother, who was Vivian, the food critic. And
she wasn't an evil mother, she was an evil stepmother.
She was an evil stepmother to Norma, I guess. Yeah. And you know, he tries to say, oh, she, you know, presented her as her mother or whatever. I don't really buy it. It's definitely a retcon in my mind. My only question is like when the retcon happened. Like, did he write the Secret History and forget there was a plot and then fix it? Or did he always plan to rewrite Norma's history? You know, the retcon was from the beginning, or was it later? That's the only question in my mind. But it's clearly retcon, because if you watch those scenes, like, I feel like there's no question that is Norma's mother.
Yeah, you wouldn't take that much guff from a stepmother without someone mentioning it's a stepmother.
Yeah.
You know?
It's yeah, it becomes an intense thing, and it's like the fact that she's so like disappointed by her review of the Double R.
It did, like, if you said that all of this happened when Norma was very young, right? And that basically, you know, she for some reason went to live with, you know, basically her dad and her stepmother, and when she was very young, and grew up with her as her, you know, as her mother for most of her life.
Yeah.
You know, you can maybe do it that way.
Yeah.
But I think if she was older and sort of, you know, I think she wouldn't necessarily have that kind of view necessarily by that relationship.
I think she's about 20 years older than Annie is. So, yeah, she wasn't that young when it happened. I mean, there are some discrepancies about the timeline. I think a birth date for Annie is given that implies she was 16 during the season 2.
Oops. Hey, Cooper. What are you doing, buddy?
Attaboy, Coop. Shut up.
What are you running for the Senate? Hashtag politics.
Oh, man. Too true. Yeah, so anyway, that, you know, that's a whole issue, but nonetheless, it is clear that Annie is significantly younger than Norma for various reasons. So yeah, it doesn't really line up that, you know, that's the case. So okay, so anyway, that's how he resolves the Norma Annie sisters, the mother, all that stuff. And then as for what happened to Annie, basically she is in a catatonic state the entire time after she comes out of the Black Lodge, and never really comes out of it. The only thing he does put in, which really, this was like almost, I don't know, I got a loss, like a David Lindelof, almost like a winking at the audience vibe from this, but he put in that every year, the day on the anniversary of the day that she emerged from the Black Lodge, she says,
Uh-oh.
"I'm fine." That's it. Those are the only words she speaks ever. That's the only sign that she can speak at all. And she says, "I'm fine."
That's in the final dossier?
That's in the final dossier. That's in the Annie chapter.
I missed that part.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, like I remembered Mark Foss tweet about what's a least favorite thing someone could ask you in an elevator, and he said, "How's Annie?" and so like when I was listening to that, I really felt like this is kind of trolling the "How's Annie" people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like every year she says, "I'm fine."
He let her answer the question, so he doesn't have to be asked anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even though, I mean, I guess it's partially ironic because she's not really fine. She's in this like comatose state. She never really was able to live a life after that. It completely ruined everything, seemingly, and that would explain why, Frank wouldn't try to contact her. She wasn't able to communicate at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's the answer. Like she was just completely, put in a coma by that experience.
Well, that's what makes me think the idea of her saying "I'm fine," besides answering, trolling people, answering the sort of meta question, is this idea that like, we have, it's not as dire of a situation from her. Some idea that like her mind is somewhere where she's fine. You know what I mean? That idea.
Yeah, maybe it's like the Naito thing.
Yeah, exactly. Where whatever her consciousness is in the Black Lodge or something.
Yeah.
Or somewhere else, and that it's some weird sort of way of her communicating that she's not sort of in this dire state as it seems. But that's interesting.
Yeah. So those are your Annie answers.
All right.
Your
Well, people being in a coma is such an interesting coincidence with characters in this town.
Indeed. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that naturally segues into talking about the Audrey chapter. So, I mean, did you have any thoughts about the Audrey answers? Such as they are?
It didn't really clear up. I mean, it was interesting. I I have a lot of thoughts about the Audrey part. In terms of the big question about what was happening to her at the end of the show, when she wakes up, she's at the Double R dancing, and she sort of wakes up in this room. It didn't answer to me what that really is.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not.
It didn't really. I mean, it seemed to suggest that she was mostly fine for a while. And then at a certain point, once Richard got 10 years old, her life sort of got worse.
Yeah.
Right? Because she was sort of a single mother doing
Yeah.
She had her business. Seems like we're going pretty well.
Yeah.
She was, doing everything on her own. She wanted her parents' money and all that stuff. And then something happened and it got worse. And then she ended up marrying Charlie.
Yeah.
Mostly out of financial convenience, it seems.
Yeah.
And then things seem to get worse. And so I think that the last thing is just the idea that she was, probably in counseling at some sort of thing. But that, I mean, it doesn't explain to me what we saw. Even if she is at a treatment center, I don't understand what we saw. I don't understand like what was happening to her? What was she was she remembering something, or was it a delusion that she was at the Double R?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not Double R, at the
Roadhouse.
Roadhouse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But why would she be having a horrible fantasy? Why is her fantasy that she's stuck with Charlie in this, like, you know, Luis Buñuel esque, like, surrealist,
You're
like,
right. It is like
drama?
that. I didn't
It's
even
a
think about
complete.
that.
It's like Exterminating
It
Angel, where
is.
they want to go somewhere, but they can't quite ever leave. But
Yeah.
they do leave, but do they really leave? And
Right.
it's like
Right.
it's this whole other vibe of the show that's sort of encapsulated with its own tone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it doesn't explain to me why she would be, if that's not her real life, right? Like, either either the fantasy should be good, or your real life is good, or the fantasy is bad, or your real life is bad, and then you pair those two up, right? Because one is you're creating to deal with your issue, right?
Yeah.
So if you issue that, like, your life is bad, then usually that means your fantasy would be good, right? You're envisioning a better thing.
Yeah. Well,
but it looks like her life was bad because she's driven to delusion.
Yeah.
Right? But her delusion is of something bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that in terms of, so yeah, I have, oh shit, I don't know how I'm gonna organize my thoughts here. I mean, in terms of David Lynch stuff, like, I think if you're talking about like Lost Highway, or even more so Mulholland Drive, I mean, I think you have, and maybe Inland Empire, though I'm not really sure what Inland Empire is about. You have.
You've only seen it.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen it multiple times. It doesn't matter. You have this idea of a character, seemingly like living in something like a fantasy world that is in a way better than their reality. But what you also have is, it kind of collapsing in on itself, or like slowly turning into a nightmare, like becoming, like the reminders of the badness start creeping in. That's what it reminds me of.
The idea that even if you can create an alternate reality and have a delusion that ignores your problems are ultimately inescapable and will doom you and come back to haunt you in the end. And
exactly.
It's a great trope, But I feel like here, what's confusing is where's the good part, of her life that she, and what's weird is Tammy seems to validate that what would be the delusion, of her being married to Charlie and having a seemingly normal life in that respect is real. The dossier says that actually happened.
Yeah. So that's that was the other thing I was going to say. So one thing it does pretty much say is that she wasn't in a coma the whole time. Mm-hmm. She came out of the coma. She did interact with Richard to some extent.
Yeah.
And and that also that Charlie was real. Mm-hmm. She doesn't name him, but it does seem strongly implied that that's who she's talking about.
Say Charlie, but yeah.
I mean, I think the inference is pretty logical there. And so that does like narrow the range of possibilities, and the idea of delusion was definitely on the table. It is weird that she never mentions Richard. Okay, so right, that's the other thing I have to add about this. There's some behind the scenes stuff about this. That I've heard. And I don't know the whole story, so like part of this is fact and part of this is speculation. So what is known is that what they originally wrote for Audrey.
Speculation?
Yeah, there you go.
That's specufact.
That's tough. I don't know how to decide. Specufact sounds like a credit reporting company.
It does. It sounds like some sort of analytical accounting firm. Specufact. Did you get your Specufact score?
Exactly.
Oh man, my Specufact score is 7,000.
uh, so what was originally written for Audrey in the script for the new show? Um, when they sent it to Sherilyn Fenn, she refused to do it, and she said, "No, I'm not going to do that. If you want me to be in the show, you have to rewrite it."
Wow.
And they did. And
they gave her the worst storyline of the show.
And yeah, so I mean, what they rewrote it to is something she agreed to do. And so, okay, that's where the facts are. The speculation, and I think Mark Frost like sort of quasi confirmed this in one of his like book tour appearances. He didn't specifically say this, but he said enough to imply that the scene with Sylvia, where Richard comes in and like robs her.
Yeah.
I think that scene was Audrey originally. I think I don't know what else they had for her, but I think that scene he was gonna come rob Audrey, and it was gonna be his mother instead of his grandmother.
Oh, I thought you meant it was gonna be Audrey robbing Sylvia in a violent way, and she didn't want to do that.
No. I think she didn't want to be the victim in the robbing scene.
Yeah,
that's my theory. Because he did say like we had these scenes of Richard treating her badly, and so yeah, I suspect that that was one scene that was going to be Audrey and that they changed. And she was going to be running this hair salon. Like basically, she wasn't going to have left the hair salon like she does in the book. She was still going to be doing that, and there was going to be the scene with Richard. And I don't know any more than that because the script isn't out there. But anyway, I think that's part of the thing is this whole hair salon plot is part of the original script. And so she was going to interact with Richard and acknowledge him in some way. I think that's something that really stands out about the series, that not only that she doesn't acknowledge Richard, but that everyone talking about Richard, almost never acknowledges her. There's only that very late scene, the one before his death that he has with Mr. C, where he says that's who his mother is.
Yeah.
But Ben never talks about her. Jerry never talks about her. Sylvia never talks about her. Cooper never talks about her. Nobody talks about her.
It's like she's been in a coma that whole time.
It's exactly. And so I don't know what David Lynch envisioned, because Mark Frost did indicate that the scenes for Audrey were written by David Lynch exclusively. The new scenes. So I don't know what he was thinking, and it seems like Mark Frost is speculating to some extent on what David Lynch had in mind, because it's not clear from the show at all, and it seems like he's speculating it was some kind of delusion going on in some kind of psychiatric facility, and Charlie's still around, but he's also part of the delusions. That's what it looks like he's saying to me. Though, yeah, we can't really nail down the details at all.
Yeah, that it was just a psychiatry session, and maybe she was hypnotized or something,
right? And
she got lost in the.
What's the stuff about Billy? Like, I'll never understand Billy and Tina and Chuck, and like, who the fuck are these people, and why is this a thing?
And her delusion is, that was the problem. When we originally saw these episodes, is her delusion is including real people,
strangely connected to reality. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like it calls into question, like, I don't know if there's some extra level to what's going on.
Man, I was just thinking, like, this whole idea of her delusion being sort of, centered at the beginning, centered around going to the Roadhouse. I was like, did something bad happen at the Roadhouse to her? Like, what could like be the thing? But the thing that this is, I guess, supposed to tie to is, Cooper raping her.
Yeah, which is basically confirmed. Not that it wasn't confirmed in the series, but
yeah,
it's like extra confirmed.
Yeah, so it would be interesting if somehow that had to do with the place that she had an issue with.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really line up like that.
Yeah. It seems like she went on for years, and it was like Richard that caused the problems.
Yeah, maybe the older he got, the worse he got. I imagine it was like problem child, and he got like, or when you talk about Kevin or whatever. And
yeah, more, yeah.
The more trouble he got, and it drove her crazy.
Worse. Yeah.
But just the idea that David Lynch rewrote the original idea, which was more mundane, it seems like, and more just sort of down to earth, and like just a normal, like what
Basic
they did with Van Horn, just a progression of their normal life.
Yep.
It's interesting that it says sort of even more, about those Audrey scenes, that he, in light of this idea that she sort of refused to do something, and is like, okay, well, we'll do this. I'm specifically writing this, with the hopes that you will do this thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm giving you something I think you'll want to do.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this is what he thought she would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of, like, the big sort of, climax of the whole delusion, this whole idea of reliving her youth and, doing Audrey's dance and sort of being the talk of the town again for a split second. That's interesting that he's like, this is what I'll give her to do. Revisiting like that part of the character.
Yeah. I guess there's something a bit like Norma Desmond about it. It's like this weird, like, reliving the past, stuck in the past, or yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really think about it that way.
Yeah, like he said, okay, you don't want to do this, so what I'll give you is a character who has this sort of unfulfilled life that's sort of gnawing at her. She's clearly, like, upset with the choices that she made, and she's taking it out on everybody else in her life.
Yeah.
And then I'll end that with her inexplicably reliving, like, the joy of her youth before it all comes shattering down, and she sees, like, the real reality of her life, the naked truth of her life.
Right.
You want to do that? Like, yeah.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, it sounds great. Should I be there? But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
That the idea that it wasn't just organic to the story of this season. It was like, no, this is specifically what we'll have her do.
I think it also explains why she's so, like, separated from everything else.
Yeah.
In this weird way that it wasn't conceived that way. But I do think that what they gave her, as, like, ridiculous as it is kind of more interesting than their original plan.
For sure, yeah. I'm still upset that there was no, Cooper and Audrey. Anything.
Yeah.
I
mean, tell Harry I said hello. Like, it feels totally underwhelming to me as well.
Right? Yeah. I still thought, like, it wasn't clear in the book, but did Audrey think, for any period of time that the kid was John Justice Wheeler's?
Oh, yeah. I don't think she even mentions John Justice Wheeler.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if, like, if does she remember, the encounter with Cooper? Does she, like, know that happened?
It seems like she does. Doesn't she reference that? Now I'm getting confused of what's in the book, because I know Richard in the show says she had your picture up somewhere or whatever. That's how he knew who he was.
That's true. But I just got the sense that there could have been a thing where there was a period of time before she knew or something. because it was like several months before she even knew she was pregnant.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I think. I don't know how she ever would have known.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you know what I mean. Unless Doc Hayward or someone was like, "Oh yeah, Cooper came in to your room." You know. I mean, I guess they could have
But
told
it's
her. He
like,
did say that, but
for sure, yeah. I mean,
but
yes,
it must have been crazy if she doesn't understand that that wasn't the real Cooper. Thinking that he just came in there and raped her and left.
mm-hmm.
Like that's insane for the real Cooper to do.
Well, she did eventually go crazy.
Well, that's
So,
what I'm saying. Yeah, it sort of fits in.
mm-hmm.
If she really thought that, you
And
know.
maybe rape is not exactly what happened. Maybe there was some, sweet talking of her or something. Like he at least tried to capitalize on her affections that she already had for Cooper.
Well, so I won't deny that it's possible from the show point of view, but the book definitely says that Cooper came out of, or Audrey came out of the coma 3 weeks later. So it must have happened while she was still in a coma, according to the book.
Oh, is that why you call it rape? Because she didn't consent to it. Oh, okay.
According to the book, I mean, I do think the show.
Sorry, yeah, I forgot about that point.
Didn't clarify that, but yeah, that they specifically said that she didn't come out for 3 weeks. So,
but then how? Yeah, I don't know how she's putting it together that he's the. So
that's
basically,
what I was saying. Like Doc Hayward
like,
or someone must have told her.
So basically, she wakes up in the hospital and they say, "Hey, we just did some blood work, and you're pregnant.
Yeah.
This happened 2 months ago. Who's the father?" She doesn't have any memory of anybody. Now, from the show's perspective, she should remember John Justice Wheeler.
Yeah, I agree. That was very recent.
Okay, I think it was supposed to be the same day, or maybe I'm getting the timeline wrong. But it was around.
Yeah, I think it might have been the next day.
Okay.
Because it's nighttime when that happens, and I think the bank incident must have been the next day. But it's close enough that it would have been totally possible.
Yeah. So, and then she's like, well, okay, from the show perspective, she could say, well, maybe it's his. That's why I was thinking, like, maybe for a while before it's clear that the child is evil or something.
Yeah.
That she thought, oh, maybe this was John Wheeler's kid. But, okay. But then from the book's perspective, maybe she just says, well, I don't know. I don't remember anybody. And then Doc Hayward says, well, I saw Cooper in your room 2 months ago. Yeah. And she just has to assume that he just raped her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah. I can't imagine, like really thinking that and never learning otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, there was a second Cooper. That's the one.
And the idea that she would keep his picture around is weird too. Then.
Yeah, totally.
If she did think that's why I was trying to make it work where like she wasn't unconscious.
Yeah.
He was there.
Yeah.
That he could at least have like it wouldn't have been right, but it because he's not who he claims to be.
Right.
That it wasn't like he raped an unconscious.
And Diane knew like right away. But it's possible that, she didn't know Cooper as long as Diane did. So, maybe he could have. I mean, that seems logical in a way. Yeah, because the picture thing is super weird if she knew. So maybe she didn't know.
Yeah, maybe she didn't know, and she kept this picture because she was just always in love with him.
Exactly.
That was like the first man she fell in love with. Or
yeah.
And
it's not
maybe
clear
it was
that Richard
wishful
knew.
Thinking. That's interesting. If it was wishful thinking, if like she actually didn't know.
Yeah.
All she had was Doc Hayward's account, but she wasn't going to be like, well, he raped me.
Right. Right.
So maybe it was. I don't know. That doesn't really work. But maybe
there's definitely a gap there. It doesn't seem like Richard was told because he doesn't I mean, he says, "I know your picture," but he didn't go so far as to say, "She told me you're my father." And he
Yeah.
doesn't acknowledge that he's his father until he's dead already.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. She
So,
wasn't like, I grew up. She told me this was my dad. The whole,
yeah, exactly. So but then like she could have kept it a secret because she knew what happened, or she could have just not said because she didn't know what happened. I don't really know what we're supposed to think there.
All right, next chapter. The final dossier wins again.
It's definitely a lot of these chapters have more definitive statements than the Audrey one does. Mm-hmm. It's and I mean obviously the later stuff is also like this, but there's a lot of middle chapters where we get more like direct information. The Donna chapter, for example.
Yeah. So okay. So one more thing with Audrey. Now that this is sort of the last week we have so far of anything with the story of Audrey, what are we supposed to think happened? So she wakes up in the White Room. Okay, say this is just a regular psychiatric place.
Mm-hmm.
She's some sort of therapy. She wakes up from hypnosis or whatever delusion she just was in or something. And then what? Like, first of all, her son's dead.
Right.
Which I guess he'll just be missing because his body's gone.
Yeah.
So they'll never have sort of proof that he was
He'll just murdered. Be missing forever, yeah.
Just missing forever. He just, he assaulted the grandmother and then left and was never seen again.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me, I mean, now that I know that she was actually, seemingly raising him until he was 10, well, maybe that's not old enough. I don't know. Anyway, since Jerry Horn actually witnessed that incident, it wasn't clear that he recognized him. I guess there's no reason to think that...
It seemed like it was too far for him to recognize faces.
He was using binoculars the wrong way around, too.
Yeah. It made it seem like it was pretty far away.
Yeah, he just knew it was like some guy. He didn't recognize Cooper either. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess... But it's like, it's weird that it almost could have happened, Mm-hmm. Jerry Horn could have recognized both of them.
Yeah.
And...
what if that's what Jerry Horn told the police? I killed my nephew. Or wait, what is he to him?
Ooh.
Great nephew?
Great nephew, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because like Audrey's like siblings' children would be, her siblings, he would be the nephew. So it's a generation, great uncle, I guess. Great nephew, yeah.
Because he could have said that if he saw them, like I killed my great. You're like, what are you talking about, Jerry? That's crazy.
Right. He thought he killed. He did it with the binoculars.
He thought his binoculars killed a guy. He could have said, my binoculars killed my great
Not a guy, but actually, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. He clearly didn't think that was Richard. Yeah. But it's such a weird coincidence of all the people. But I guess Jerry Horn's the one who would be just wandering somewhere.
In a town full of coincidences.
Yeah. So close, but yeah, I think no one will just ever know what happened there.
His foot that wasn't his foot for one scene somehow, I think maybe got him to that place at the right time, which is a weird idea. I don't understand what happened. I don't understand Jerry's story.
It's weird. He gets a whole chapter in the final dossier, and they try to sort of connect the dots, but really, like, to me what it did was kind of retcon the whole character and try to make him a sort of, he's kind of like a Big Lebowski type character. Even from the beginning. I mean, they have like stuff going back before the original series where he's like this, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, he was certainly eccentric, but watching the original series, I just didn't get the sense of him being this, this sort of spaced out hippie type figure. Mm-hmm. The way he's portrayed, it makes more sense with Pot Farm Jerry, but not so much with very, very capitalist, business oriented Jerry from the original series. He liked food, he liked traveling. but I don't know. Um, it was weird for me. I didn't need those dots connected. It was believable enough to me that he would kind of grow into that at some point.
Yeah.
Not to say he was always like that. You know, like,
well, he was clearly the the less serious of the two.
Oh, very true.
Others.
Yeah.
You know, with business, and it would seem like, you know, yeah, once he got an older age and he could like make
Do
money off like, you know, marijuana, you know, business, like, yeah. But it is interesting that sort of Big Lebowski like angle.
Yeah. They kind of do all this weird stuff with him where it's like, I don't know. That chapter was, it seemed like a waste of time to me. It was one of those where I felt like the series was enough. You know, I didn't necessarily need a whole chapter about Jerry Horn. You know, a lot of these chapters are characters that were not explored very well or at all in the new series, and he got plenty. I mean, you know, plenty for what they did with him.
Yeah, maybe just an excuse to have an extra chapter with some information that is pretty easy to write. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Contradicting anything.
Right.
Yeah, there were some fairly big bombshells though here.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I thought was interesting in the Judy section was this whole thing about let's see, what did it say? To the book, to the pages. Where she's talking about this idea of a male and female sort of evil force. Judy, and then the male is Baal or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Baal is later known as Beelzebub.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that's only a skip and a hop and a jump away from Beelzebub.
I agree. I agree.
And I thought they were going to go there and just say it, but they didn't actually just say that.
True.
Maybe this is the Bob we've been hearing about. Chief.
It's almost there, and given the fact that Judy is connected to Sarah Palmer and Bob is connected to Leland, and then you have Laura, the product of it. It's like...
And they have a line here and another thing about the Trinity. And I thought, is that the Trinity?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, Leland, and Laura, you know, basically Bob and Judy, you know, being parents. And then Laura is somehow this, like, child of the two. But yet Laura was the orb from...
That's what I don't get. That's what I don't get.
But maybe there's... Maybe the idea is, like, there's the duality there that each of those... So basically there's three humans. There's Sarah, Leland, and Laura, human beings. And then there's three spiritual forces, Judy, Bob, and the Laura orb that was created, and they inhabit their respective humans. Like, maybe that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, Laura was the orb, but also was the child of the two humans.
Right.
You know, and maybe that's the idea. And then, like, so then the orb is sent to inhabit Laura to do something to stop Judy, which would be the mother, but then later Bob. So yeah, there's something.
It's also weird that the Bob thing seems to come from Judy. Like the way it's described in that chapter doesn't really line up with that. You know, that the idea that Bob was created in 1947 or something.
What I was trying to reconcile that with the scene where Experiment is spewing out the stream of whatever.
Yeah.
Bob is in there, the Bob orb is in there, and the eggs are in there.
Yeah.
And maybe that's some sort of maybe this being can exist in multiple places, right? And so a version of itself is basically in the egg.
Yeah.
Like, the female version is in the egg, and the male version is Bob. And they're sending both of that to Earth or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
And then Bob ends up inhabiting Leland later, and then the sort of female one is the creature that goes into Sarah's mouth.
Right.
Now, there's still a lot of questions about that whole night that happened, and the radio station. We can get
Mm-hmm.
into that later. How that all works out. But just maybe that's the idea, and that was basically Judy, experiment replicating itself and sending a version of itself to a host in the
Mm-hmm.
world, and that host became Sarah.
Yeah.
And somehow it, I guess, was there the whole time. Now I don't understand the box. Like maybe the box sort of captured for a second the celestial version of
Mm-hmm.
experiment, which was
Yeah.
still out there somewhere.
Right.
Uh, and that's what came in and killed the Sam and Tracy, and then sort of left. I guess
Yeah.
because maybe that fixes it if there's two experiments.
Right.
There's the sort of the one that's a parasite of Sarah, and then there's the sort of experiment model, I guess you would
Right.
call it.
The one that exists in this strange realm.
Yeah, Judy and experiment. Maybe that you could say it that way.
Yeah. And maybe the Bob Orb is like that.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the Bob that exists in the real world, and then there's sort of a Bob that that exists in that other world, mostly the Black Lodge, I guess. But there's also that convenience store scene in Fire Walk with Me where, and actually there's also the scene at the end when Leland goes into the Black Lodge, and there's the Garmin Bosia confrontation where Bob and Leland are shown separately.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does seem like Bob can be separate from Leland to some extent, even while he's quote unquote inhabiting him. So anyway, yeah, I was thinking something along those lines for the explanation of Sarah being inhabited by Judy, but also Judy's in New York.
It makes me think that like the whole inhabitation thing with Bob and Leland, like, are we supposed to think it's the same idea that when Bob is inhabiting Leland, the orb is inside of him?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Or is the orb thing different because it has to do with Bob escaping the Black Lodge and sort of using the doppelganger as a host, as a vehicle?
That reminds me. I thought an interesting little bit is that he took the time in the book to say that doppelgangers and tulpas are different.
Yes. I'm glad yeah.
I thought that was an interesting distinction because there was a little bit of a blurry, it wasn't clear. It seemed like they were similar ideas, but it's like, no, they're different. Mm-hmm. Not the same thing. So yeah, anyway, the specific circumstances with the doppelganger maybe is but we saw the orb in the 40s, so I don't know, it makes it seem like, I don't know if we're supposed to think that was in Leland or not.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not specifically connected to the doppelganger, I guess is all I'm saying, since they showed it independently.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm thinking if they showed it like that, because it is that's what I'm saying. It's an independent thing that can do
its own thing.
It can float around.
Yeah.
But we're not supposed to think, I hope, that in the context of the original series, when Bob would come and go and inhabit Leland, that the orb was flying around and entering him, right? Like, wasn't the idea that we piecemeal together that Bob sort of metaphysically travels through the electricity and can use this through, come through the ceiling fan and sort of, teleport somehow into and take over Leland when he wants to do whatever he's going to do with Laura and whatever. Like, that was, but that's not being transplanted by the idea that, like, no. He's not necessarily sort of traveling through electricity per se. He's a floating orb at times.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it does feel to me like the orb is partially a compromise just because they didn't have the actor. I do wonder what they would have done if Frank Silva was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
If they
Because the point is that he has escaped the Black Law, and I feel like that's why the orb is independent, because it's the idea that it's his singular form. You know, it's the
yeah,
one
you're right.
that counts. You know, and it's the thing that has left the Black Lodge, right? I think.
Yeah. And so that wasn't true when he was inhabiting Leland,
Yeah,
which is a
exactly.
weird. It's like no, he was still in the trapped in the Black Lodge somehow, even though he was also
Well, it's
doing
like what Mike
things.
does. You know, they can sort of go through the electricity and like
Right.
communicate and do things, and it's weird, but it seemed to work. You know, the traffic lights, the whole idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I was just thinking of that. I was like, wait, we're not supposed to think that Bob was always this orb flying around into hosts, and because that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It kind of seems like we are to me, but it also doesn't really add up.
Mm-hmm.
So because the way it's portrayed, I mean, we the characters see like this orb emerge. When the woodsmen show up and they see it flying around and stuff. I mean, when Leland died, no one saw anything like
That's
that.
my point. Exactly. So that's yeah. I think this the orb is different because it's Bob after leaving the Black Lodge, and it's just like before Bob came to Earth, he was an orb. You know, it's his singular form. But I think somehow when he gets connected to the Black Lodge, he gets a human body and like, um, you know, a jean jacket. And
Right.
he can go around and do stuff like a
Right.
like a corporeal being,
Yeah.
crawl over couches and terrorize young
Mm-hmm.
cousins of main characters.
Right.
But anyway, Beelzebub. Anyway, so I don't know. I it was interesting that I just the idea of them even sort of trying to equate Bob with Judy and put them on the same level, and not have sort of Judy be like the top and Bob be subservient or something,
Right.
a lesser power or
Which is
something.
what it seemed like in the show.
Mhm.
Like by showing Bob coming from
Yeah,
Judy, it did seem like Bob was the lesser,
yeah,
and Judy's the ultimate bad.
mhm,
I mean, they don't even, yeah, the whole like finding Judy thing. There's no reference. They're done with Bob once Freddy punches him.
yeah.
Like that's all that was, and so yeah, it doesn't. It's your the
Who
book
knew?
does.
Who knew Bob was always one punch away from like being out of the story? It's like the whole time. Anytime we rewatch the original stuff now, when Bob's around, we can just go. We can just rest knowing that, man, if somebody just socked him real good right now,
Hmm.
he'd float away.
No one ever thought of that before.
Not quite terrifying.
No, not exactly.
All right. Well, why don't we just go chapter by chapter real quick and see what interesting things happen.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So we start with this. I love it. It's everything's about from Tammy's perspective, except this one little thing at the front.
Yeah.
Albert decides to show up,
Yeah. To give some closure on Leo.
which was the burning question from the finale, right?
Indeed.
Everyone's
Indeed.
like, "But what about Leo's autopsy report?"
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean I do feel like this answer sort of contradicts the series, though there were extensive rewrites at the end of the series. So maybe this was Mark Frost's original vision and he's kind of re-editing the final episode because Lynch did some notorious rewriting that he wasn't happy about at the time. And one of those rewrites included a scene involving Leo and gunshots.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought this was weird. I was like, some of these details are strange to me.
Yeah, so I mean, he ends up being shot, And I mean, he makes this note that like the tarantulas are not actually poisonous,
Mm-hmm.
which like seemed like he was. It seems like some weird sort of commentary on whoever came up with the tarantula trap.
It just
Um,
completely invalidated their whole like threat. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. 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 Like somebody's been watching too many Vincent Price movies or whatever. It's like okay. It's like it's weird. But yeah. Anyway, he was shot with um, in such a way that Albert concludes it was Wyndham Earl,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And the only reason I say that that contradicts the series is that, you know, in the final episode, this was the rewritten thing. There's a scene with Bobby and Shelley in the Double R where one of them is like, you know, I wonder, or I guess it was Shelley, like, I wonder where Leo is now. And Bobby's like, are you kidding? I'm sure he's having the time of his life. And
Mm-hmm.
they cut to him with the little string attached to his like
Yeah.
tooth or something, you know. It was actually just reused footage from the previous episode when he originally got put in the trap.
Mm-hmm. But
But
it's
so
like he's still holding the trap with the spiders.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And at that point, Wyndham Earl's already gone in, right? He
Yep.
goes in at the end of you know, the whole events with the Miss Twin Peaks contest, and so
Mm-hmm.
by the time that scene's happening, he's already in there,
Yeah.
and so he couldn't have shot Leo unless he came out, which there's no indication from this book that he came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna assume that he did, you know, stay in there slash die in there. You know, the whole Bob taking his soul thing, like that's
Yeah.
the definitive end. That was in the original script, even though it played out differently. So I do think that was the end of Wyndham Earl there. So I don't really get. I don't know. I guess it's just a slight rewriting of that scene that Wyndham Earl just killed him before he left.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the idea.
What if? Yeah. What if somehow in some weird way that when they're like, I wonder what Leo's doing now. He's having the time of his life. What if that was somehow out of sequence or something, and that was supposed to be like the day before when
Right.
Wyndham really did leave him in the trap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
But
It could be. It could
maybe
be.
something too.
I. Yeah. 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 I
That was
gotta.
supposed to be was supposed to be a flashback. It was supposed to be like this is what he's doing right now.
Yeah. I gotta watch for it on the rewatch because there's another scene in the Double R that is 100% later because it's, you know, it involves someone saying I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper. Um. And I'm wondering if they actually show that those happened at the same time or not. I don't actually remember. Um, but yeah, that could definitely be a way out of it.
And there's always the cover that time goes differently in the Black Lodge, so maybe that fixes everything.
Oh right, of course
He
it
can
does.
be out before he goes in.
Is it future?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. You know, he writes in Albert's voice. You know, it's tying up a slight loose end. That was definitely also not one of my major concerns with the series that they didn't address. But hey, it's there. Um, just like Hank's shivving in Secret History, like I didn't necessarily need that to
Yeah.
get closure. Like the fact that Hank's going to prison again at the end of season 2 was enough for me.
Mhm.
They're like, that's over. You know, Norma's gonna get a divorce. That's it. We don't have to worry about Hank anymore.
Yep.
That was fine for me. But yeah, getting this extra piece, you know, that Leo died, like, okay, you know, fine. But it was one of those, I don't know. It's a strange inclusion, and having it at the beginning when like the rest of the book is different is kind of odd.
Hmm.
It makes me wonder if this was written for Secret History and not included there for some weird reason.
Hmm.
Because it's more like Secret History, these like found documents, you know.
Yeah. they have this little addendum page before it that tries to give some context to why this document is in this book. It doesn't really do the job, but they sort of acknowledge with that page that it's like, okay, this is weird.
Right.
To say in the context of why Tammy would be including this,
Right.
Yeah, I enjoyed hearing, he did a good job with Albert's voice. There was a second here that I thought I was reading Tammy, and I remember her making, or Albert makes a quip about that Gordon is luxuriating with one of his imported nieces. I was like, what? Tammy's saying that? And I was like, oh no, wait, sorry, this is Albert.
Right.
I was like, okay, that makes it make a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was like, she's being so flippant about that. That's so weird.
Yeah.
But again, I thought it was weird they even included this line about his imported nieces. That it's like, why can't we escape the specter of
yeah,
of Gordon the Grabber or whatever?
Yeah.
Of this lascivious Gordon Cole.
Even back then, I mean, this is from the original series period.
Yeah, why are they shoving that in our face?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. That was definitely one of the more uncomfortable and strange elements of the new series. In terms of really smearing an original series character.
Yeah. In a lighthearted way at times.
Yeah. Definitely. But I think, yeah, and I don't know, I guess that's where I don't know where the line is, because part of that may be what I'm bringing to this, I guess because it's played by David Lynch, because of the content of the new series, not to mention David Lynch's work in general, it seemed really uncomfortable and like a strange choice, and it seemed strangely self-aware or meta or something, or was it obliviousness? I really don't know.
That's the thing is if something references itself, it's meta. But can you reference yourself and not know you're referencing yourself?
Exactly. Yeah. Is there some element of they don't even realize how this comes off?
Yeah.
That it's just supposed to be tee-hee and that's it.
The problem is they address the issue head on before giving examples of the issue.
Right.
That's how it plays out. So it plays out like they're making a point, because that's how you make a point. You start with the main idea, and then you give details and examples to prove your idea. And it's Gordon's story with this whole case almost virtually starts with his conversation with Denise.
Right.
Which starts with this whole pat me on the back because I supported you when you came out,
Yeah.
And I was ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Because I have this sort of old-fashioned morality that doesn't judge people on sort of extraneous things, and it's about who people really are.
You do a good job. That's what matters.
Exactly.
Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. Everything else doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And so, which is sort of problematic too, because it sort of doesn't allow you to sort of actually accept the differences of the person. You choose to ignore them for the greater good.
Yeah, they have that shot of him being uncomfortable.
There it is. Yeah. So it's
when she mentions the hormones.
They're doing all the things you do to make the audience say, oh, they're trying to say something about this subject.
Right.
Yet when it comes down to it, they don't A, really say anything.
Right.
And B, do it in this lighthearted way where it can be oh, this is all a joke. Well, then why are you saying why are you bringing this up as like something to talk about? You know?
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 I
Or,
agree.
and and they could have flipped it, right? Because they could have said, listen, if we want Gordon to be, this sort of more freewheeling character, he's having fun in his old age, and he's super charming, and he can get any girl he wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But then the scene with the Denise should have been flipped, where it's a lighthearted thing. Oh, Gordon, you're such an old dog. Oh, you're really giving it to the ladies, aren't you? And like, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, they could have set up this whole thing with it being a funny thing with his character.
Yeah.
But instead they set it up as it being problematic for his character, and then he ends up doing like problematic things. So it's
right.
So it's weird. It's like it's lighthearted on the back end, but they set it up as like a dramatic question.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, this Albert thing's interesting. I'm glad we know how many times Leo was shot, and where.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Specific details there.
All right, you want to go to the next chapter here?
Sure.
Next file, excuse me.
Yeah, please.
I love the detail of the images of the folders, and it's all.
Yeah, in the audiobook, like, she would read the entire, like, the number, and
oh no,
it was like,
oh no,
yeah, it was ridiculous. It was kind of driving me crazy. But every time we got to one of those, it was like, you have to wait forever for her to actually say who it's about.
That's great.
Know? It's like this
built up tension between like, who it is.
Exactly. Whereas like if you're looking out on the page, you can probably just look and see what it says.
You ignore everything else. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like window dressing. It's just to make it look like a thing, like a file. Mm-hmm. So yeah, anyway, that's one of the pitfalls of audiobooks. Definitely stuff like that doesn't work very well. Yeah. I actually listened to the it doesn't really matter, but I listened to the Leftovers audiobook. And there's this extended scene that happens with Jill and someone from the Guilty Remnant in a chat room. So they can use the chat rooms. And when the audiobook reader was reading it, the audiobook reader was like reading their chat room name every single time before they would say something. And it was this extended conversation where they were constantly saying like, Jill 12347. Blah 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 blah. Guilty R 1375. It was like over and over. It was driving me insane. Anyway, something like that just doesn't play well in audiobook.
So they didn't have did they have two actors reading the
No, it was just one reader doing the whole thing.
It was just a person reading basically the book.
Just reading the text, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it was like that. It would have made sense with more than one person, I think. But yeah, I guess they thought with just one voice, like he had to just read who was saying what every time.
Yeah, that's tough.
Totally ridiculous.
All right, next chapter.
Yeah.
Next file. Who's up next? Shelley Johnson.
Yeah.
Start with the Johnson family here.
Yeah. I guess we stay with that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much we really get out of this. I mean, there's a little background about Shelley. There's some stuff about her getting together with Bobby after Leo, and I guess, before Leo as well. And, about Becky. Mm-hmm. Brief mentions of all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know, this all seemed a bit perfunctory to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, there wasn't anything here that wasn't like, something you could reasonably guess.
Yeah.
from the series. So yeah, I don't know. I question the inclusion of this. Much like the Leo chapter, because it didn't really reveal anything, you know. Though, was that in this chapter? I'm trying to remember. There's a thing about Stephen in this book, and now I don't remember what chapter it's in. But it might have been later. It might have been. Now, would it make sense to be anywhere else?
There was a thing about Stephen later.
Where would they talked about Stephen?
They talked about Stephen when they talk about
Gersten.
Gersten, yeah.
Oh, okay. So in the Haywards and Horns chapter. Okay. Oh, right, because she was involved with Stephen. I forgot. Okay, right. So there's this indication that...
Or maybe the Donna chapter. It might be in the Donna. It was when they talked about the sisters, yeah.
There's this indication that Stephen was involved in some kind of like big drug deal. And then went missing. You know, and it was this whole extra thing that was not clear from the show at all. Do you
I don't quite remember that.
You don't remember that? I swear there's a point where that stated that he was involved in some big to do. And like maybe that it went wrong or something, and maybe that explains, you know, why he was so out of control.
Yeah, here it is. A warrant for Stephen was recently issued as a suspected accomplice in an international drug running operation.
There you go.
He's gone missing.
Yeah.
The idea is that he and Richard were involved in the same.
Oh, even Richard's involved.
Yeah,
okay.
It said that it's literally the next sentence is that prominently involved Audrey's son, Richard Horn, who was still as large and wanted on, among other things, a hit and run warrant.
Yeah. No red though.
No red.
Nary a mention of red. So yeah, that's just gonna stay like it is.
Yeah, even Shelley gets a chapter and there's no, and then she met red.
Not a word about red. Yeah, it's a killer. So yeah, anyway, that thing about Stephen, I don't know, the question of canon or whatever is always here, but the idea that he was involved in some big thing.
Well, I would say, since they also said Richard was involved, and what we know about Richard's involvement in anything like that was he was talking to Red about some deal that he never did any work on.
Right.
So maybe it's just like that where, Stephen was sort of tangentially involved, but because he was obviously a user, and maybe trying to sell or something, but it wasn't like anything he was really like some kind of crime boss or like that.
It sounds crazy, but yeah, I mean, it's not consistent with what they show with Richard, but I mean, some of these details aren't, and so I don't know. I'm wondering if that is some element of that is in the background of what's going on with him in those scenes, because it seemed like there was some extra thing with him that they never told us about.
Well,
and that was new information,
right? And I guess that's the one thing we get out of this part with Stephen is the idea that they didn't find his body in the woods.
Apparently not. Yeah.
So that's the last place we saw him, right?
Yeah.
Was he had the gun and Gersten leaves and gun goes off, but we never see if he kills himself, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Since he's missing, it makes me think he did kill himself. But yeah, that would mean he wasn't found, and it is weird.
Well, yeah,
Mark Frost himself saw.
Yeah, it's not like he was in the woods where no one would find him.
They were actually witnessed there.
Yeah, So yeah.
So yeah, it would have to mean that like Gersten moved the body or something. I mean, it starts to seem ridiculous.
He just didn't. He just shot somewhere else. He didn't kill himself, and he ran away, and then
Yeah,
he's just gone now.
I guess you could think that. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't clear what was the problem to begin with, so who knows what would fix it.
True. True.
Yeah, it's upsetting. The whole Gersten story was actually really a tragic story.
Yeah, so I mean I did think that the Donna Horn, thing, like I did think that actually did fill a gap that I didn't understand.
Donna Horn?
Yes. The Donna and the Ben Horn stuff.
Oh.
Basically the idea that the fallout, the reason why Donna's not on the show, which is partially just a necessity, and also Gersten's situation really traces back to the revelation at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that that was actually gonna have been that big of a deal.
You mean the underlying truth of the fabric of the family becoming torn wouldn't affect him?
I mean, not to say that it would be nothing and they would just like move on with their lives and be fine. Mm-hmm. But I guess I never would have predicted that in a way like their lives totally fall apart. Mm-hmm. Because of that. I didn't think it was that big of a deal.
Yeah.
They got a divorce, and then like Donna doesn't talk to anyone and moves to New York, and becomes addicted to drugs.
I got the sense that it didn't necessarily have to be that big of a deal, but these particular characters, made it that big of a deal by their choices. Even the idea that like Doc Hayward moved across the country.
Yeah.
And just like left. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, yeah. It wasn't like he stayed and wanted to fight for the family or something.
Well, that's what surprises me. I mean, I just didn't think that's where that story would go.
Yeah, that's why it felt very tragic, because they were all kind of making choices that were making it prolonging the problem. Until the reconciliation later.
Right.
Which was nice to, a little bit thing at the end.
Right.
So yeah, I thought it was nice. I mean,
but the connection to Gersten's situation like never entered my mind. That maybe this has something to do with Ben Horn being Donna's father. Like I never would have thought that.
Like Gersten's fall from grace, the child prodigy. How did he end up being like dealing with this like low level Steven guy?
Exactly.
And it's it's interesting. Yeah, that whole. It's all because Ben wanted to be a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
He ruined all these lives.
And it even in a small way goes back to John Justice Wheeler. Tell the hard truth first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Famous last words.
He's like, yeah, tell the hardest truth first. I like that. Mm-hmm. No,
you work up to the hardest truth. That way you do the least damage over time.
Exactly. Like, yeah, that's not a good idea.
Oh, jeez, Ben. Yeah, it's interesting to get all of these extra details about the characters that even exacerbate how miserable their lives are. Like. There's these extra details about, and it's the fact that Ben sort of never really mentions Audrey the whole show. These ideas that these characters just like had some issue with their parents or whatever, and then they're just like, well, I'm not talking to you for like 30 years. Guess I won't be talking to you forever. It's an interesting pattern of behavior with these people in this town.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought overall Donna's report was pretty interesting. And you know, for a character that was very important to the show,
Yeah.
very important in Fire Walk with Me,
Yeah.
who got completely shafted in the return.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a pretty nice chapter that like doesn't, you know, ruin her character, doesn't like, you know, like say anything super weird. You know, since she didn't get a sort of final word, you know, in the
Right.
show proper, you know, so it doesn't like, you know, ruin anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a tragic path, but
Hmm.
uh, but yeah. I mean, I think she was asked to return and just didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I think they, maybe she would have been in New York scenes.
It's a bit. I mean, she almost has the same story as Audrey, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
You
it's similar.
know, promising young beauties from broken homes
Yeah, yeah,
leave their hometowns to venture out on their own. You know, and like both marry older men
yeah, yeah.
for certain reasons. And yeah, it's upsetting that you know Audrey and Donna, you know, didn't have more of a relationship.
Yeah.
They could use each other's support in these times because they were living similar lives.
Right. There was a mention that they corresponded a couple of times, but no details about what it was.
Um, Anything else about this whole Horns and Haywards and
Uh, mm,
or should I say case 008-072-0119?
Now I think I'm listening to the audiobook. That sounds right. That sounds right. Uh, yeah. No, I think that's it. Oh, it does say here on the wiki page. I forgot about this that the father on Richard's birth certificate was listed as unknown.
Unknown, yeah.
So make of that what you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
Oh
think
God, we
that's
gotta talk about the whole Major Briggs thing and like what happened with his death or the fake death.
oh my god. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
who
yeah.
did what and
That's
when and how and
oh god. It was way more complicated than yeah.
yeah. Oh, there was a fire at the station. Yeah, it was a little more complicated than that.
Oh yeah, that it couldn't just let it be that. It was
Uh,
yeah, it was weird. It was weird.
um, I did love this list of curiosities. Curiosity the first. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. All right, what's the next part?
So I mean, let's see. Well, okay, so we talked about Donna, we talked about Audrey, we talked about Jerry as much as there is.
Yep.
There's a chapter on the double R that I don't even think I remember.
I didn't actually read that
I
chapter.
don't remember what's in that
It's a
chapter.
long chapter.
What the fuck are they talking about for so long? I definitely listened to it, but I don't remember. I don't remember specifically what that's covering. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a
Uh,
surprise to go the double R. What intrigue is happening at the double R that
yeah, I
deserves?
mean, I think some of it is probably talking about the franchising deal, Norma's thing.
Ooh, you
That
don't say.
yeah, exactly. I do remember that, but I don't remember.
That was the icon next to the Black Horn, right? The franchising deal.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Hawk's map, right? It was the fire and the you know
What
the
is
Black Horn.
what? Can you tell me about that, Hawk? Oh, Frank.
I can't tell you about that unless you have an accountant present.
We talked about Annie. Um, there's a Wyndham Earle chapter that also gives some background on Caroline and kind of explains. It goes into some detail. I think it's kind of either rewriting or because I haven't ever actually read My Life, My Tapes, but I know My Life, My Tapes goes over that material as well. Just the incident in Pittsburgh, what happened between Cooper and Wyndham Earle and Caroline, how that all played out, how he met him, what happened to Wyndham Earle afterwards. It's to me, all that stuff was like, I don't know. I mean, some of it was details that I didn't necessarily know from the series because they didn't say them, but it wasn't. I don't know. There weren't any shocking revelations there. It was pretty much the story as I thought it was.
Yeah.
Maybe with some mild alterations and details. He mentions Caroline was a lawyer. I was surprised by that. But other than that, not too much stood out from that chapter. There wasn't a whole lot about Wyndham Earle's like more mysterious side.
Mm-hmm.
It was really about how crazy he is, and that he sort of the idea that he manipulated the situation. He wanted to drive Caroline and Cooper together so he would have an excuse to kill them. Like that's sort of the idea.
Ah. That rascal.
I know, such a rascal. There's a chapter called Back in Twin Peaks. I don't remember what's in that chapter. Sorry. I probably do remember what's in that chapter. It's just that title isn't enough to jog my memory. There's a chapter on Miss Twin Peaks. I do know what's in that chapter, which is a very elaborate explanation for why and how Lana was actually the winner of Miss Twin Peaks, even though we all saw that Annie won the contest.
Okay, and that is
basically it's to make a long story short, the story's longer than it needs to be. It also includes a lot of details about Lana's life afterwards. She ends up meeting Donna again. There's a whole thing. She ends up getting involved with Donald Trump. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I mean, he isn't referenced by name, but it's obvious that's who they're referencing. Anyway, basically, like when Annie, he says that because that was one of the reasons we thought Annie was erased from existence. That it was like, no, Lana won Miss Twin Peaks. What are you talking about? It was like, oh, So anyway, she came out, she was in this coma, and he says, like, basically Miss Twin Peaks had certain, like, formal duties, and because Annie was not able to meet those because of her condition, they gave it to the second place winner, who was Lana. So she officially became Miss Twin Peaks, even though she didn't win originally or whatever.
So this unerases Annie from the Mark Frost canon?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's an Annie chapter. I mean, yeah, he put Annie back in there. The Norma thing and this sort of like explains how Annie was conspicuously absent, and yet still it somehow makes sense. Still all of that was valid. That's the attempt, at least. So that's the all that stuff was kind of tidying up from the mess he made in The Secret History. So then we get a chapter on Dr. Jacoby where it basically just describes his his evolution into starting the Dr. Amp thing. It's another one of those kind of perfunctory chapters. I wasn't that shocked by his being Dr. Amp. I didn't think it was completely out of character or bizarre, or like I couldn't even imagine how he ever got there. Filling in that gap, I mean, he lost his license and he goes to Hawaii, and there's some other stuff. None of it is particularly noteworthy, but but yeah, eventually he comes up with this idea for this sort of podcast or something, and it does kind of imply that he's gonna get together with Nadine later. So if you're curious if there were sparks flying there, apparently, according to Mark Frost, there were sparks flying there.
Uh-oh. When shovels and drapes combine.
So then we get a chapter on the log lady, which to me was again perfunctory. It's there's a little too many of these because the show had like a whole log lady death like moments, very huge. That they paid a lot. Log lady got several scenes, more than many characters. And she got a whole moment where she got a send-off on screen, this kind of emotional send-off. And it just seems like Mark Frost wanted to write his own version of that, I guess, even though the show should have been that to some extent. But, yeah, I mean, he gives... he gives her some final words, and they're sort of typical log lady vagueness. Not to say it was a waste of time, but I don't know. Like, I didn't really get a lot out of it. It didn't add a lot to my understanding of her character, or any mysterious elements that she referenced. It didn't explain the one under the moon on Blue Pine Mountain. For example, or why Laura is the one, or any of the other vague statements she makes at various points.
But now we know where her log ended up.
Hawk
has it.
Oh, right.
She left her log to Hawk. He keeps it on his mantle.
They did mention that. That's true.
So
That's true.
He says he's keeping an ear open just in case it talks to him.
I forgot about that. You're right. That's true.
That's key. Now
that is in there. Actually, that brings me to the next chapter, which is about Harry. And it basically says that he got cancer. Again, this all seems a bit perfunctory. But he got cancer and, had to stop being the sheriff. And one thing it said that I actually appreciated was that Frank was brought in only as a transitionary measure for like a couple of years. He was supposed to be a temporary interim sheriff, and that Hawk was going to be the sheriff afterwards. Like, Hawk will take over and be the sheriff. Nice. Which like we said on the podcast, like that seemed like the natural thing. So anyway, the book basically confirms that that's what's going to happen, or maybe it even has happened by the time the book is written. I don't remember exactly how it's phrased, but Frank's tenure was always intended to be just a transition because they wanted a Truman in there.
Yeah, it doesn't really fix it completely, but it helps a little bit. Yeah,
exactly.
It helps on the Hawk point. But it's kind of like, well, why would you bring in an outside person for a transition instead of letting the guy who's already inside just do the thing?
Whereas the reality, I believe, is that they wrote it for Harry. The actor, seemingly at the last minute, decided he couldn't do it, didn't want to do it. And so they had to rewrite it, but Hawk already had a plot. And so I think that's really why... or a big part of why it's that way. But yeah, I agree. It doesn't quite add up, but just the idea that Hawk should be the sheriff, at least there was some acknowledgement there.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, that's clearly what should happen there. This random guy that no one's ever heard of, like... Harry never mentioned he had a brother. He didn't even live in Twin Peaks. Like, he was working somewhere else. I forget. They mentioned a specific place. So anyway, that's pretty much.
Some weird sort of nepotism of like, well,
it's totally that. Yeah.
We're down one Sheriff Truman. He's got a brother that's a Sheriff Truman. I guess he can just be Sheriff Truman for us too. It's kind of like the thing.
Exactly. But I don't think the book says that Harry died. I think he's still alive
Mm-hmm.
as of the end of the final dossier. So I guess someday, maybe when season 4 comes out,
Yeah.
he'll decide to come out of retirement.
That'd be, I mean, we've already been given too many gifts with this show, but that would be really pretty insane if he's like, okay, I saw all the hubbub of the
Mm-hmm.
return, I see what I'm in for now. Like, okay,
Yeah.
go and do something.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems within the realm of possibility.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Hey,
I mean,
maybe Josie will finally come out of that knob. I
yeah, there's
mean,
not a whole lot. I mean, I say not a whole lot. There's nothing about Josie. There is extensive backstory about Josie in the Secret History, where they talk about her background, her childhood. There's a lot of stuff about her early days and how she ended up,
early days when she was Jousy.
Josie. Exactly. Exactly. How she ended up with Andrew and meeting Thomas Eckert and, that whole thing. Um, that could have just as easily been in this book, but I guess, like, the new series doesn't address Josie in any way, so maybe.
Yeah, that whole thing with like the Ben hearing the noises,
Yeah,
and
nothing to
it's
do with
like,
Josie.
can you believe that they're actually going to get,
Mm-hmm.
talk about Josie after all this? I mean, that was such a cool idea, and
It
for
was.
that to go literally nowhere,
It
it's
was.
it was just an amorphous noise that has something to do with something, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was connected with this weird Black Lodge, other world stuff. But yeah, I can't get beyond that because they hear the noise in you hear the noise in the hospital in Las Vegas.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not even specifically connected with the hotel.
Yeah.
So, like, I came to assume that it had something to do with the fact that um the door, the boiler room door, like, leading to this hallway, like, it was some kind of it was some kind of effect of that, the fact that that phenomena was happening there. But I mean, there's no reason why that has to be specifically true. It just seems like it was, in Cooper's case, there was a connection to Mike, and Mike's behind that door, and so, maybe it's Mike's noise. I don't
It's just Mike whistling in that room, and that's just what it sounds like.
know.
He's just waiting and whistling.
So, so that was a pretty breezy tour through those middle chapters.
Yep.
I mean, there if I guess for me, like, the show makes it real, and, like, all that stuff is, it's only interesting to me when it's really adding to the show, and otherwise it kind of feels like fan fiction, and I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me. I think, I got more out of the stuff where they were talking about the new series.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's just, again, like we said before, it's because it's Mark Frost's version of what he thinks Tammy thinks.
Mm-hmm.
It only means so much,
Yeah.
you know. Versus, and it's interesting. I mean, I guess it would be sort of greedy. I don't know, maybe too greedy of an idea, but I feel like he could write a dossier from, like, a whole bunch of people's perspectives
Yeah.
and just churn out a bunch of these books about the same subject matter.
Yeah.
Here's Gordon's version. Here's
Gordon's
Albert,
dossier you think would be different. Yeah.
yeah, and Albert's version, and
Yeah.
like, Diane's lost dossier.
Oh man.
And, like, I feel like he could just have a whole career doing books like this,
Yeah.
where you just, like, it's just sort of like a very, like, cool creative writing, like, of these topics.
Yeah.
With these characters, and he can just kind of, like, fill in gaps where he thinks is sort of interesting, and
Speaking of Diane, I was surprised that Diane is. I mean, she's referenced, but she's kind of only referenced in passing a few times. Like, she does even mention that, you know, she was a Tulpa and hanging out with them for a while. But I was surprised at how little attention her character got in the book. You know, given the fact that she actually interacted with Tammy probably more than, you know,
Yep.
most of the people she's talking about here.
Yep.
And the fact that she had this direct experience, and obviously the stuff with Diane was also connected with Cooper and these larger questions that she's trying to address at the end here. I don't know. I just thought it was odd that Diane didn't really get any more. I mean, maybe they thought the show was enough, but I thought the show was enough on a lot of these things. So I don't know. The decisions are interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
About what to elaborate on and what to just kind of leave, like that what the show did was enough.
Yeah, I don't think it made it clear what Tammy thinks happened with Diane. Like this whole idea of the Tulpa she references, but like, and then they reference that Diane was, you know, in the sheriff's station.
Right.
What does that mean? Where was she before then? What does Tammy think she was before? She just reappeared. You know, because if basically she never met the real Diane.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So this other Diane who appeared there was somewhere else. You know. So it's unclear, like, since they don't reference Nido, like, what does she think Diane was this whole time?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Well, then of course you have a nice hefty chapter with Major Briggs.
Yeah. So with the Major Briggs chapter, that's where they really start to get into the meatier plot details from the new season, where they're like specifically referencing certain things, like the fire at the station, which is a whole thing. Like, I didn't even think to question the fire at the station. And I did think it was interesting and kind of not only like, you know, sort of, you know, Lost-esque or something, but it also reminded me of just the podcast of like, well, here's some scenarios that might have happened. And I don't actually know the answer.
Oh, yeah. It is interesting when she would say, listen, it's one of two things. It's
Yeah.
like, just go, okay, here's the realm of possibility of what happens, and it, you know, but it doesn't definitively say what it is.
Yeah, so it's like Major Briggs, maybe he started the fire himself, or maybe Mr. C did it. Was Mr. C there or not, or did he get there too late? Like,
and then they conflate it with like the wreckage of his car.
Yeah, he faked his own death, seemingly.
But was that the fire in the car that was the fire that killed him, or was it the fire in the station?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay, you confused that for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it seems more convoluted than it needed to be. I didn't understand why. I just didn't think to question it that much. I thought it was more clear cut of like, you know, I thought Mr. C started the fire, and Major Briggs escaped, you know.
You know what it reminds me of? And only you will know this specifically, is that film noir script I wrote many years ago, where there's a character who like faked his death with a car going over a cliff. And but there was some other plot that had to do with where he was at the time, and it reminds me of that, where it's like too convoluted by half, you know, of like, right. It doesn't quite add up. It's like, I see what you're doing, but it doesn't quite make sense. You know, did he fake his death at the station, or did he fake his death with a car?
Right. And I thought it was just supposed to be. I didn't even think he faked his death. I thought the point was, the place burned, he escaped, and he wasn't in the real world anymore, and people assumed he died because the station burned. I didn't think he literally meant to fake his death. Like,
but it's the idea that when he left to hide. You know, and I guess it does kind of help. It's the idea that, you know, Mr. C was trying to kill him for his information.
Right.
So that's why he had to hide. And I guess that's what it adds. I mean, even though we know, I guess that's part of the issue is that Mr. C meets with Major Briggs, right? They agree to that, the show and the book, that they did meet
Yeah.
before Briggs was dead. But I think
Yeah.
the book is saying that Mr. C possibly came back
Yeah.
the day of the fire,
Yeah.
and that's when Miss Briggs was like, "Oh, he's trying to kill me."
Yeah.
So it's weird that he didn't think he was trying to kill him before when they met,
Right.
you know. But and then he says, "Okay, he's trying to kill me, so I'm going to." Maybe the fire in the station was to destroy evidence, and then he's like, "Then I'll fake my death with the car, and then I'll leave, and then like Mr. C will think I'm dead."
Right. Right.
Maybe.
It could be. It could be. Uh,
Just trying to piece together what she says happened here.
there is some discussion of the Ruth and Hastings contact, how that went down, what he asked them to do. It's a little bit clearer than it was in the show. How that all played out. Um,
Yeah, they didn't clear up for me why Briggs hid information that he had at some point, but didn't have when he needed it. So he
right.
needed Ruth and Hastings to get it, but he knew, but it was something he could have them get, but he couldn't get it for some reason.
Yeah, it was like he hid the information in like an easily accessible area, but just that no one would think to look there.
That's what you do when you're battling a
Like
supervillain.
it was just on a blog or something. It was in some simple. I forget what they said exactly,
Well, no,
but
it was still wasn't it? It was still had something to do with the military thing, right?
no. But I thought he said that. I thought he said that it was it was like hidden in plain sight or something like that it would be found if he left it in the military stuff. Am I wrong? I swear that's what it said.
Well, it does say, it says, as we've now been able to confirm, once Hastings and Davenport succeeded in hacking this military database, most likely with clues provided by the Major, and obtained the information he was after, they returned to the same location of the zone a second time to person delivered to the Major. So,
Well, then what am I thinking of? I
but
swear that was a thing
yeah, there
about.
is a thing you're talking about where they say they do mention something about.
Oh, is the. Now I don't remember again.
There's something like you're saying where they mention that he left it in a place that would be accessible for someone else or something like
Is
that.
that the original way that they found out how to contact him?
Oh, I see. I thought the Major got contact through their website. I thought, yeah,
Oh yeah, right,
yeah.
right, right,
And then he told them where they can meet in person the
right.
next time.
Yeah.
And then he told them about this thing that he needs them to go do. Uh, yeah, I wish I could search this book.
I know.
What's the Control F on
I
this book?
know.
Uh,
Well, I'll just mention in passing that um, one thing that is connected to Briggs, um, but that I was really surprised was actually not referenced in any way whatsoever was Dougie. I believe the entire book never mentions Dougie
Mm-hmm.
once. And I found that very strange. There is a brief reference to Duncan Todd in the section where, she's basically talking about Mr. C's criminal empire and kind of explaining that he amassed these billions and so on. Like, there is a reference of Duncan Todd,
Mm-hmm.
but no reference of Dougie, no mention of the Dougie ring
Mm-hmm.
inside the Major's body, which is an element that the book doesn't explain
Mm-hmm.
either.
And then,
Um,
wait, you didn't see the part where it said, and then Major Briggs swallowed Dougie's ring? You didn't see that part?
no, I missed that part.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's
I
right.
must have hit a bump or something
Yeah.
when that part happened.
Yeah, it's yeah, that's the mystery that still is a mystery. No matter how many times they talk about that fateful second time in the zone, when all kinds of hell broke loose, it's still unclear what happened, and it's still unclear, yeah, how the ring got swallowed or why the ring got swallowed.
Yeah.
Um, and the fact that Mr. C had the one thing he was looking for the entire show, except for like the very end when it's like, oh, I want the coordinates to find Judy. But like the whole sort of main thing he wants, is, get the coordinates. He had access to the moment Ruth died.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
It's on
yeah.
her
I'll
arm,
never get over that.
and I don't understand. And they always gloss over that. Like why is that? I need that explained.
That was the question I asked Mark Frost on Twitter that he didn't reply to.
Was she wearing a long sleeve shirt? I mean, just say that. If that's all it was. If he just didn't see it, like there was,
Oh man, that would be
like
hilarious. So
she was
hilarious.
chilly that night. It was, I'm gonna take a sweater, and it was a good call in that respect. She may have helped save the world by wearing that sweater. Otherwise, he would have found the coordinates instantly, and none of the plot would have happened.
Yeah, it's terrible. I feel like the setup for that plot is kind of a mess because there's just no winning with it because it's established that he's in the area. He knew about what was happening. It
Mm-hmm.
was specifically concerning something he really wanted, his main goal.
Mm-hmm.
So he had every reason to be there. But at the same time, if he is there, then the whole plot falls apart. Like all that other stuff that happens is totally unnecessary. And
Yeah.
he could just cut straight to the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the coordinates that eventually end up being the so called real ones are the ones from Ruth's arm.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
For sure.
Though it's hard to be 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, they chose to phrase the thing about the coordinates in such a confusing way, and never to really clarify what went on. But yeah, anyway, like yeah. I feel like that's almost what they call a plot hole.
Almost. It's very close. Um,
And I feel like they only get around it not being a plot hole by not saying too much about it.
mhm.
By not specifying details, there's all this room for weird, oh, she was wearing a long sleeve shirt. It was a chilly night in North Dakota. Like, sure, why not?
Why not? I made a couple notes here. I think. Let's
Got some
see
notes?
what I said. I marked something. Um. Oh, so it says a few days later, when the wreckage of Briggs' car was found at the bottom of a nearby canyon with charred, unidentified corpse inside, and a few of Briggs' teeth conveniently placed nearby. Blah blah blah. So, whose body is this? Who did Briggs kill to fake his death?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I thought that was pretty extreme. I was
That
like,
does
wow.
seem kind of disturbing.
And it seems like he pulled some teeth out of his mouth and threw it in the wreckage to
They were really his teeth?
I'm assuming that was the point of
how they identified who it was.
That's part of the thing.
I mean, maybe to give him the benefit of the doubt, you know, maybe he used his military connections to get access to a corpse that was already dead.
I like to think when Ruth and Hastings met the Major, he was missing a bunch of teeth. He had like a bloody mouth. Yeah, that'd be great. It's like I got a mission for you.
It was like whistling through his teeth.
Like, we better listen to this guy. He's a little scary here. It's like, I hope these coordinates lead to a dentist. Oh, Major Briggs. Okay, the other thing I wrote, something about, let's see. Oh, he desperately wanted those coordinates. He pursued him across a quarter century, even after a public finding that the Major had died in that car crash, and he never relented. If Briggs ever came out of hiding from whatever manner of, quote, space he was hiding in, prior to appearing in Buckhorn, we have no record of it, but it's clear that the second time the Major emerged to meet Hastings in Davenport, the double was there waiting for him. So here's, okay, so they're saying Mr. C was there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
The double killed Briggs, Davenport, Hastings, and anyone else who got in the way. Huh? Like, what does that mean? Seize those coordinates and headed for their location. That's not true. More or less directly. By the way, of the South Dakota prison and our former confidant. So this is wrong, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's just
not
wrong.
what happened. Like,
yeah.
He wasn't heading. What was he doing?
Or was he?
Well, here's the problem.
Because he was heading west. Or was he heading east? No, I don't remember. Which one did she say, and which way was he really heading?
Should have been heading oh god. So so Ray had the coordinates that he supposedly got from the secretary. Why is she even in the picture?
If the secretary even existed, I'm starting to doubt that. Ray could have made it up.
Ray's an informant. Who even knows?
Yeah, exactly.
So it starts with Ray. Then Mr. C comes in, and he's trying to get the coordinates. Ray gets himself in prison, which is east of Buckhorn, right? It's in Yankton Federal Prison in Yankton. And that's on the map that he sees. That's east of him. Now, I believe Tammy says he was going west. I think that's correct, which didn't make any sense. But he's trying to get the coordinates from Ray, right? He doesn't already have coordinates. So this is saying that the night Ruth and Hastings died, that's when he got the coordinates, which would make sense if he saw them on Ruth's arm.
Right.
You know? So you could say, okay, well, maybe he did get the coordinates from Ruth's arm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but he wants all the coordinates he can get because he doesn't know which ones are the real ones.
Right.
So he wants the Ruth's arm coordinates, and he's got those this night. And he wants the coordinates from the secretary.
Yeah.
Which is not Ruth, right?
No. Okay. Ruth was librarian.
Ruth was a librarian.
Person.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. The secretary was killed in a car bomb. It's a totally separate incident.
That's right. Yeah. So maybe that's the idea, is that, you know, he did get her coordinates. And so later when Diane sees the coordinates from Ruth's arms in the photograph and texts it to him, that's information he already had, presumably. If he got him from
so
Ruth's
maybe
arms.
that explains why he's talking about it before seemingly she sent that message, you know, because he's talking about that. I remember that was one of the things I was hung up on in that episode or that part. He was the fact that he sends the smile all thing to Diane, and then she sends the coordinates, but we saw that he sent the smile all thing after he already had talked about having the multiple sets of coordinates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, Richard was already dead by that point.
So when she sends him, he already has it. He doesn't need them anymore because he's already figured out which ones are real.
Yeah. I mean, that could be true, I guess.
Huh.
It's not 100% obviously not true.
So when did he say I have 3 sets of coordinates?
Yeah.
Okay, but then after Diane sends him, then he has 4?
Then he would have 4 at that point, yeah. But it is possible that, I mean, he did, according to the timeline they show us, which, you know, various problems there, but yeah, he would have gotten Diane's coordinates after he said that. So, yeah, it could work, technically.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, how does Tammy even know this?
Know what? Oh.
This perspective of what happened in this meeting? Is she saying this is what Hastings told her? She says, like, based on the findings. I'm not sure what she's saying here. Like, how does she know what she's talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's speculation, yeah, based on findings.
From things she found. All right. Oh, I love this thing about the dweller on the threshold.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so yeah, here's something I circled. Immortality. So it says, first question, it's one that all the others lead to. What did the double want if it ever actually made it to this place? What was it after? Some kind of form or even greater power that already appeared to possess. What could that be? Immortality. So I thought that was interesting, as maybe that's what Mr. C wanted, through getting to Judy.
Yeah, that was weird. That was an extra, because it was never clear exactly what his goal was beyond the coordinates.
Yep.
You know, coordinates for what reason exactly?
Maybe Judy, but then for why Judy? And then it's like no clue.
Yeah.
And then this run on the threshold thing I thought was interesting because I'm like, now you're confusing me on what I thought these characters were. She says Deputy Chief Hawk once spoke of another spiritual concept that may be related, called the dwell on the threshold. In parentheses, Agent Cooper mentioned hearing about it from Hawk in one of his tapes to Diane. And then he says, this dweller is said to represent the sum total of all the dark, negative, unresolved qualities that reside in every human being. Okay, so that made me think that, the night that Cooper and Briggs are camping, and Briggs goes missing, and Cooper sees this, like, figure that he, refers to as a dwell on the threshold. This is seeming to say that this is sort of conflating the idea with the doppelganger and saying that was either Cooper's doppelganger or that was Briggs' doppelganger.
I always thought Dweller on the Threshold was the doppelganger.
Did you?
Yeah, I've always thought that from the original series even.
But who's doppelganger?
The doppelganger of whoever's confront, like everyone confronts their doppelganger. I thought that was the idea.
I thought that was the idea when you go to the Black Lodge.
Yeah. When you go to the Black Lodge.
I didn't think, I guess what I'm just saying is I didn't think that the actual image that we saw, in the woods was supposed to be like Mr. C or something. was supposed to be Cooper's doppelganger. Because isn't Cooper who sees it?
Wait, what are you talking about?
So there's the shot in the episode when they're camping and then Briggs goes missing in the woods, right? Like,
oh yeah,
of
okay, I
that
know what you're
figure
talking about.
in the woods.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
Cooper does. Am I remembering this wrong? Tell me if I'm wrong. But this is what my memory is that Cooper later refers to that as a door on the threshold.
I don't think so. I could be wrong.
Okay, I thought that's where that came from.
I think Dweller on the Threshold is about confronting your shadow self or the doppelganger idea. That's what I remember, though I don't remember it specifically enough to be 100% sure. I didn't think that hooded figure was the Dweller on the Threshold.
Okay, I thought that's where that originally came from on the show. I thought it's when Cooper mentioned that.
I thought it was when they were talking about the Black Lodge, but yeah, I don't remember exactly when that comes up.
Huh, okay.
I think yeah. Yeah, I remember the scene. You may something this world, Cooper, but there are other worlds. It's this long monologue where he describes what this confrontation is like.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That's
I guess there are scripts out there.
Yeah, it says this is when I think this is Hawk talking about the Black Lodge and the White Lodge, and he talks about meeting your shadow self, and that's the dwell on the threshold.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Something else.
Yeah, so that seems more or less consistent. Another thing. So I'm using Amazon to search through the book, which is somewhat helpful. So yeah, another thing I wanted to bring up that's really from the Jeffries chapter, but it's not anything specific. It's just the way she addresses Philip Jeffries to Gordon. Had me questioning that line that Gordon says where he's like, Jeffries, who doesn't exist anymore, at least not in the normal sense. Like, how does he know that? The way she writes the chapter, there's no indication that he ever said anything like that, or that he has any sense that Jeffries exists in some other form somewhere. Which
that made it seem like he has been in contact with Philip Jeffries.
Yeah, and there's no indication of that in the book.
And that's a mystery of the show is who was Philip Jeffries? Who was Ray talking to? Was it Tea Kettle Philip Jeffries that he was talking to? Like, and so, yeah, that doesn't help.
The book doesn't help with that, strangely, even though I feel like that's not. I don't understand why that's a mystery, honestly. Like what? Why is there this extra person involved? Like, we got enough to deal with, There's plenty. Like the things about Judy and all that. Like, I kind of understand why that was left up in the air.
Well, they're not even saying there was an extra person, are they?
Maybe there wasn't, but it's not resolved who that person was. I mean, the connection is there, but it's not solidified what really was going on.
Yeah, it's weird to have a Philip Jeffries chapter and not make it clear who, and a Ray chapter, and not make it clear who was Philip Jeffries and who was Ray talking to.
Exactly. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Ray chapter made it seem like Ray was an FBI informant to Philip Jeffries. Am I crazy?
I think that's right. I think the Ray chapter was saying basically that Ray thought he was talking to Philip Jeffries.
Yeah, so I guess I'm confused about the idea that Ray was an FBI informant. the idea that Gordon would say, or was it Tammy? I forgot who said that. That Ray was an FBI informant. Because if he was just talking to Philip Jeffries, how would that get recorded in any official fashion? You know, like he's not working with the FBI in any direct way anymore.
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe it's a question of what is it. You know, if he's an unofficial FBI informant, you know, if Philip Jeffries is going around saying he's FBI and has a mission for Ray or something.
Well, yeah, so that's why Ray could believe it, but then why would that be like in official records? You know, why would that be stated as though it's a fact?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing I don't understand.
It says Ray believed he had been recruited by and was working for Philip Jeffries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, does that fix it?
No, okay, let me find the line here. Just so I can explain with a little bit more specifics. Let's see if I can find that line here.
And we have to talk about the judgment.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. And now this is Gordon. This is Gordon saying this. And now this thing of two Coopers. And recently, a paid informant named Ray Monroe sent a cryptic message indicating that the Cooper we met at prison is looking for coordinates.
Oh, this is from the show.
That's from the show.
Oh, I thought you were talking about in the book.
No. Just how it lines up. That's my issue.
The show, it's saying he's a paid informant, and the book, it's not saying that.
It's not clear that he was a paid informant of the actual official FBI and not just Philip Jeffries. Sort of gone rogue / gone Black Lodge or whatever happened to him.
Well, yeah,
it just seemed kind of inconsistent, but I guess like this whole monologue, I mean, the earlier part of that monologue is what we talked about earlier about Judy that Tammy doesn't reference. So again, I guess I'm going to call into question that whole monologue if it was written later or something. Mm-hmm. And that there was some kind of weird different, and you know, Gordon suddenly knows about Philip Jeffries.
I mean, could it be true?
Could what be true?
What if Gordon knows? What if Gordon was in on getting Ray to be an informant or something? And so it's like, okay, yes, Philip Jeffries recruited Ray. You know, Philip Jeffries, even though he's a tea kettle, or possibly, told Ray that he's FBI and was telling them what to do. And Ray was getting money from the FBI through Gordon, who knew this was part of the plan. And so in that respect, he was a paid FBI informant.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but the way those chapters are written, it doesn't seem like Tammy is aware of this.
Yeah, I know, I agree.
And so, but given the fact that Gordon makes this monologue, you know, directed to Tammy and Albert.
But it's not clear from Gordon's monologue who hired him. You know, it's just saying that.
I agree, but there is at least an implication there that she should realize that, you know, that Gordon knows something about Philip Jeffries, which she doesn't really act like, and that Gordon probably has some knowledge or connection to Ray Monroe's role here.
Listen, Tammy's losing her memory as she goes on here. In the middle of the book, you know, she's forgetting those kind of details, like what Gordon knows. She doesn't remember what he knows.
Yeah, did this monologue get erased from history?
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
That's one way to fix it. I think I made. Let's see. I circled a couple things in this chapter, in the Ray chapter. What do they say? I like this line. As long as we're skating on the thin side of the ice here, I was like, that made me stop. I go, the thin side of the ice. So the ice has at least two sides.
Yeah.
And one side is thin, and one side, well, I don't know what the other side is, but it's probably not thin. It could be thin, but it's probably not thin if there's a thin side, right? So the other side is possibly thick, at least thicker than the thin side. But then it made me think about the density of ice, and I was like, how does ice have a thicker side than another? So this poetry really threw me for a loop here.
I mean, isn't like thin ice? I mean, isn't that just like a cliche expression? I mean, isn't the idea?
It's playing off of the idea of thin ice, right? But it's saying something else. It's saying that I think it's that's why I call it poetry, because it's like it's a little bit different than just like it didn't say skating on thin ice, the thin side of the ice, right? So the whole point of thin ice is that like it's a small barrier before you fall into, presumably water, right? If it's like a frozen lake or something like that. So the ice isn't thick, right? That's the whole point of thin ice.
Right.
So there's so the ice doesn't have a thin side. The ice itself is thin, right? So I don't know. That's why it threw me for a loop, because the idea of like one side of the ice is thin, the other side is thicker. Well, then how would you ever fall through? There's no peril. You're gonna hit the thick side. So that's not the point of thin ice. The whole point is the entire thing is thin. You know what I mean? Both sides are thin.
Okay.
From the bottom of the water would be thin too.
Yeah.
And the top of the water. You know what I mean? So both sides are thin with thin ice.
Right.
That's why it just made me stop and think, because I was like, the thin side, huh? What's the other side?
Right.
Words. That's what words do. But what I thought was interesting, it says, what if this not only made it possible to go forward in time, but also backwards? I thought that was an interesting thing to say.
Yeah. That is that from Ray's or Philip Jeffries'
This
chapter?
is in Ray's chapter.
Okay. They're sort of overlapping to some extent. Yeah, I thought the book was trying to make an analogy or try to say that what was going on with Philip Jeffries was related, similar, comparable, etc. To what was going on with Cooper at the end. It seemed to me like there was intended to be some kind of connection there. And yeah, it seems to me like they're referencing the idea that, Cooper's going to go back and like try to change the past.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
That was my takeaway, at least, because there's also the idea that when he shows up in the FBI office, Philip Jeffries shows up in the FBI office, and he's pointing at Cooper and saying, "Who do you think that is there?" That he's sort of like thinking about the future. That's why he would be confused.
So that's what I thought. That's why I circled it, because I thought so. They're saying that, because I always thought the idea was that Philip Jeffries, when he's in Argentina and he checks in at the hotel and he gets the note about Judy, that. That's like 2 years before he shows up in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Right? When he's like, when Gordon says you've been missing for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So he goes to the future.
Yeah.
But I thought when this line about going backwards in times, and then they go, could that explain the shock and dismay Jeffries exhibited in your office when he learned what year it was? The idea that Jeffries actually came from the future instead. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I never thought he had come from the future. I thought he came from the past.
Right.
That's why he was shocked.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, throwing that in there. The going backwards in time. So like somehow he went to the future
Mm-hmm.
and then experienced some things and then came back in time to Philadelphia.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they say investigators found a matchbook in Monroe's pocket. Oh, fun.
Oh yeah, there's a whole thing about the Dutchmans.
Oh, wow. I can't believe he did this. This was unnecessary. Like, I was perfectly fine with what the Dutchman's was.
Me too. Yeah.
I did not, and he just came and knocked it over. He came and was like, "Oh, by the way, that was a real place once."
Right.
Like, damn it! Now what does that mean? Like this is. I literally wrote in the book Langoliers question mark. Like, is this a Langolier hotel? Like, this is a version of it from the past, and it's just sort of always stuck in the past, and weird entities live out there, or is it you're time traveling when you go there and you're going back to when it was really there,
Right.
and that's the real world,
Right.
and Philip Jeffries is really there in the real world as a you know what I mean? Like,
Kind of seems like it could go either way.
Yeah, I completely threw that up in the air. I did not appreciate
it was weird to say that was a real place.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. That doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. I found that bizarre.
And
of
then,
all the things to elaborate on.
Yeah, and then like Dillinger was there, and it's like, come on, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Did Elvis show up too? Like, it was super important. We get it.
Yeah. He's one of those celebrity tie-ins.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, it makes me think of the convenience store. This idea of these like locations becoming supernatural vehicles or something.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything about the convenience store though. I don't remember any mentions of the convenience store, but I don't think Tammy ever knew anything about the convenience store. I'm surprised she learned about the Dutchmans, but I guess it's because Ray had the thing in his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only reason.
And she could like Google, the information.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tammy. All right, today.
Oh, are we there?
We're at today.
Wow. So what happened today?
Well, the lights went out and came back on.
Oh, right. Oh, today is, Oh, no. That's not today. Anyway, sorry. That was a while ago. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Today is Tammy talking about, I guess, the big scene at the end at the sheriff's station.
Right.
She's talking about...
But that's not the real today. She gets to that later. Anyway.
Oh, there's a real today?
Yeah, there's a real today.
Oh, you mean like right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a today and then there's like a right this second.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Later today.
Exactly.
So she talks about, the double fading away, not quite mentioning the woodsman.
She doesn't mention the woodsman?
No, I don't believe she mentions the woodsman.
Okay.
Then she talks about this something black and spectral floating out of its body and up through the ceiling. And then she mentions, the Cockney kid with the green glove. So, she truncates a huge sequence line here. But I thought that was interesting that it's, this not like this, hey, Chief, Bob, Bob came out and, blah, blah, blah. So It seems like no one really in the room either had, after sort of Cooper disappears, with Gordon and Diane, like presumably this timeline goes on according to the book. Right. And but no one sort of is able to really elaborate on what that thing was that was black and spectral. So, no one was like, oh, that was Bob.
That was Bob, yeah.
So it was just sort of this thing. And maybe they, maybe from, maybe besides maybe the onlookers couldn't even really tell there was a face in there.
Right.
Maybe depending on how that thing is.
Yeah.
So they just saw this orb sort of doing things.
Yeah, because I guess there's only a few of those characters who could have even recognized Bob's face. Like Hawk showed up pretty late in the game. Lucy and Andy. I don't know that Frank would even know what Bob looks like. I mean, he wasn't around. So yeah, it's kind of James, Cooper, obviously.
Well, they I think they have the drawing of Bob right in Laura's files.
Right.
So they could at least see, that'd been, possible since they did go through the files, or at least they started going through files.
That's true. That's true.
I guess do we know how far they got into that before, like, I guess did they say, like, okay, we went through everything and there was nothing.
I mean, they had all the stuff laid out, and there were a few scenes of, like, where are we supposed to look? What are we doing?
Yeah,
blah,
but
blah.
Did they ever, like, actually wrap it up formally?
No, I don't think so. I think once Hawk found the diary pages, like, that was over.
That was enough of
They
that.
didn't reference it anymore.
So I wrote here, let's see. It says after Cooper. Okay, so yeah, she's talking about this whole last scene. And she says, then the lights go out, and you and Cooper apparently apparate to the basement of the Great Northern Hotel. So that was interesting that, they see the lights go out.
Yeah, like we did.
Like we did. It makes me think of the end of the show, when the lights go out everywhere. Presumably that doesn't mean that that's the end of that reality.
Yeah,
it looks like the lights can come back on.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And it says after a brief exchange, Cooper vanishes in the dark down a long corridor that isn't actually there. Now that I don't know how she knows that unless Gordon told her. Why she's telling Cooper this. I mean, sorry, why she's telling Gordon this.
Something he already told her.
Yeah. In a way that doesn't make it sound like, he already knows.
That's who she heard it from? Yeah. Yeah.
Then she says the lights came back on, and you're left standing with the Horn brothers in a boiler room. So, he knows this because she's saying you know this.
Right.
It's interesting. But I didn't understand why she said the Horn brothers in a boiler room.
Yeah, there's no way that's possible. I mean, unless they time traveled or something. Because Jerry was in Wyoming. So it must have taken some time before he could have, I mean, Ben was there. I guess conceivably Ben could have shown up at some point. But yeah, the Horn brothers. Yeah, it's weird. Rewrites.
You know what that makes me think?
Changing
oh my god!
past?
You know what that makes me think?
Know.
The original idea was maybe the original idea was that Ben and Jerry were going to investigate the noise in the hotel, and then that would have led them to the boiler room. Right when this whole crazy thing happens.
And then they brought Ashley Judd in.
And then instead they're like, because Jerry has to say, it's the same kind of thing Jerry does. He sort of is on a spiritual investigation, a supernatural nature.
Right.
But they just give him like this other thing that leads to Mr. C.
Right.
Instead of giving him this thing that leads to what Cooper's doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That they would have actually found, that would have been like the source of the noise. That could, yeah.
Which it was.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, interesting. I should write my own dossier.
I wish I could get my hands on the original script. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what the plans were. And what the rewrites were.
Okay, so then we get into probably the most controversial part of the book, I think, which is, Laura did not die. So really confirming that this timeline, well, I don't know exactly what it's confirming. I guess not only did the timeline that Cooper vanished from continue to exist after the lights came back on, but it was affected by the changes, at least over time, of Cooper changing the past.
Strangely, not immediately,
Strangely
because
not-
there is a point where Tammy references Laura being dead, and when she said that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Laura's still dead.
Say that.
Oh God, it was earlier in the book.
Yeah, it's just somewhere earlier.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't super highlighted or anything, but it was referenced that that Laura was murdered, Laura was dead, etc., etc. Just kind of confirming what happened. It would probably take me forever to try to find it because I don't have a clue where it was. It could literally be anywhere. But I made I was writing tweets about it as I was going through the thing, and when I got to that part, where she talks about Laura being dead, and I say she talks about it, she just references it. It's not like it's like she has an extended discussion about Laura's death or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, oh, so that means actually that timeline was not changed. Laura's still dead in this timeline, and like Cooper changed a different one. Like that's what it had me thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Until I got to the end. And then I was like, oh, I see. The point here is that somehow like he did change that timeline, the one they're in, but the memories are, I don't know, gradually fading, and it seems like they faded in Twin Peaks first.
It seems like yeah, there's something with how memories work when you change the past that they're really fuzzy and hazy, and you can't quite figure out what to remember. Because it's kind of how Carrie was when Cooper was trying to make her remember her past, and she sort of kind of remembered, but it was really easy, and
yeah,
they're doing that thing where it's sort of you don't think you won't even know your memory has changed unless someone prods you about it, and then you'll realize, oh, it's kind of like Dark City, that was sort of a big part of the plot in that movie, where like there's sort of this idea of you sort of not noticing the false reality until you're confronted with the idea of it. Then you're like, oh wait, I actually can't prove this. Oh, okay, huh?
Yeah.
And this idea that they think they know what happened. So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
It also makes me think of Gordon will remember the unofficial version.
Mm-hmm.
Like, number one, why is that true? Why do you know that? Number two, does he? I mean, or is this going to happen to him too? Is he just going to watch people around him? I don't know. Was his experience, did that somehow make him immune from this? Like, I don't know. I'm confused about that whole thing. Like, why would Gordon specifically remember? But I do think one thing that this did clarify is, sort of the...
Wait, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The status of Cooper's actions, like the direct impact that they had on, the characters from the new series, not just like creating a new reality.
Yeah.
But it calls into question, because she doesn't discuss it, because clearly she doesn't know anything about it. Calls into question what happened to Cooper after, Diane meeting him, the curtain call, the 430 Richard and Linda business. Like, how does that fit in? Like, why is
that was all after the dossier would have been written, I think.
If it's the same reality, then why are there different versions of people there?
Well, they definitely cross over to a different reality. So there's the changing past, which you could maybe say the book is saying that they still
So it's
it's
a
the
both
same.
and.
It's a of course it's a David Lynch. It's a both and.
So they changed the past of the original reality. I
And
guess that's the idea.
then they go to a separate
And
reality.
that's where Laura is, coincidentally? Or was there even a third reality?
I think Laura gets taken from the past of reality 1 and is taken to the past of reality 2, and then when decades later, when Cooper comes out of the Black Lodge and meets Diane, and they cross over to reality 2, they cross over in sort of the present or the future of reality 2, where that young Laura has lived her life. She sort of forgets she's Laura. She thinks she's Carrie. She lives her life as Carrie for several decades until Cooper knocks at her door and says, "You're actually Laura."
Mm-hmm.
And then they go to. Then he's trying to take her back to Twin Peaks in reality 2.
Right.
And then he's like, "Oh no, this is the right house, and presumably the right reality, but the wrong time, maybe."
Yeah.
Or it's the right time but the wrong reality.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he wanted the present of reality 1, which is where Judy is.
Right. I guess. Yeah. I guess that was part of the goal. That reminds me, that's the other connection I felt like the book was making, which was between Philip Jeffries' situation, wondering what year it was, or being surprised at what year it was,
Yeah.
and Cooper's final line. About what year is this?
Yeah, that's interesting.
It made it seem like there was some kind of connection between their experiences.
Well, that's a big thing with the show for sure, right? Is this concept of the FBI agent who goes after a missing woman and sort of unlocks the gates of hell, basically. Stumbles upon a realm of reality he could never have imagined, and it consumes him, and he's lost.
Yeah.
Unable to really confront the challenges he's presented with.
Yeah.
It's like the anti-hero story. It's not like the hero goes in the cave and fights the dragon and wins. It's like the hero turns into the dragon or something and kills himself and is lost in the cave forever.
Yeah.
He was never a hero to begin with, What time is it,
Mm-hmm.
But that whole idea, of Agent Desmond too, going after Teresa Banks and sort of stumbling across the ring and getting lost in all of this craziness, and so that was kind of an interesting, sort of recurring sort of storyline on the show with those three guys.
Yeah.
Have that whole thing, and sort of Gordon in a way,
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit of that. Obviously not having the worst fate as the other guys.
Right. His vision of Laura is never explained or
thinking
referenced.
About that. Just he has this crazy vision of Laura, and it doesn't prompt him to change anything about his behavior.
He doesn't talk about it. There's no indication, like you said, that anything he does is because of that. It's not clear why it happens or what it means at all.
No. It's not clear he remembers it happened.
Yeah.
And it was after that scene that we see him drawing the little animal, right? Or was he drawing the animal before?
I thought it was before, and then he answers the door, and that's when he has the vision.
Okay, yeah. I always want that to mean something. This idea that, we take time out of this whole 18-part show to show David Lynch drawing something. And I really want what he's drawing to matter. And then right after that, we see this whole Laura thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, did that mean anything? Was he drawing something like the frog moth thing that went into young Sarah Palmer? I mean, was that, and that's relates to the Laura orb somehow? Does it matter what he was drawing? But it's sort of exacerbated by this whole idea that we didn't get anything more with why he even saw that vision of Laura, what that even meant.
Right.
Where did it even come from? I mean, at this point, where is she? Right? I mean, at this point, I guess Laura has been taken from the Black Lodge, right? And is somewhere.
At what point?
When Gordon sees her in the hotel.
Oh, right.
A vision of her that overlays on the screen.
Yeah. Wherever she was during that time period, which is not clear.
But it would have been after, because this is after Dale did all the stuff in the Black Lodge and Laura was sort of taken out of the Black Lodge. So she's not, so she's sort of not in the Black Lodge. She's wherever she was after that, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's just weird to think, like, where was that coming from? Like, is that from Laura in another reality projecting across to him? Is that the Laura that Dale took from the past or something? You know what I mean? Like.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they didn't really address it, so it's unclear.
Yeah. I mean, it was the past version of Laura.
It was the past version of her, yes.
For what that's worth, but yeah,
Yeah, it says, when I spoke to our good friends at the sheriff's station about this, they all got a slightly dazed and confused expression on their faces when I brought it up, as if they were lost in a fog, having trouble recalling, unable to fully wrap their minds around what had happened so very long ago. So yeah, the idea that they don't really remember some of that stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah.
We get the line here that Sarah's middle name is Judith. So just in case you were wondering if she's Judy. Then we got this thing about, the nuclear test bomb was codenamed Trinity. So I thought Trinity, Judy, Bob, Laura.
Yeah.
And then there was this thing here where it says Ronette testified that Laura had wandered off into the woods before she, Leo, and Jock entered the railroad car. And I was like, really?
Oh, he fucked that up.
I was like, no cabin?
Yeah.
Like,
they were never in the railroad car.
Did they? So instead of going to the cabin, they're like, well, we'll go to this railroad car and party. Yeah,
he got confused about what happened where. Because they never made it there. The railroad car was the murder scene. Yeah, I was surprised by that. That was very strange.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting too that she says, it's sort of the records of the past say Laura didn't die, so it's like, the changes are going to ripple through time or something, and then eventually, everyone will, it'll all be finish changing or something.
Mm-hmm.
Never remember this or something.
Yeah. That's the other thing I meant to mention is that, like, it is explained that although Laura wasn't murdered, she disappeared. I think that was discussed on the podcast at some point, the idea that that's how they would perceive it. Yeah. That Laura just disappeared one day. Mm-hmm. And nonetheless, Cooper came to Twin Peaks.
And I thought, if I remember correctly, when it still confirms that Ronette was found on the railroad tracks. Was that across state lines?
Yeah. That was the original reason why the FBI got involved.
So I think that could still be true. So even though it's not that Laura died, it's still like a crime across state lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if it's a more minor one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that he went into the Black Lodge. Like, all that stuff still happened. Mm-hmm. Disappeared.
Right.
So yeah, but it's a way of trying to get around the the time travel paradox problem of if he changes the past, then maybe the things he did to lead him to change the past won't happen anymore.
Well, it's interesting. I guess he can really, in a way, he can have the same investigation. It can go the same way. She's just not dead. She's just missing. So he's gonna be asking sort of the same questions. There's not the same sort of evidence of like the body and the murder scene and
Mm-hmm.
some of that kind of stuff. But because I'm thinking like in order for him to still go into the Black Lodge, you'd want the time that he goes in there to be the same. So if he spends however long it is for the investigation, like 9 months or however long it's supposed to be, um, whether she's murdered or disappeared, I guess you could think he could still spend the same amount of time there, trying to find her, I guess.
Right.
And maybe it's a more urgent situation or something.
Right.
If he thinks the clock is ticking. But then he'll just give up at some point. Oh, well, he'll just get lost in the thing. He'll just get, yeah, that's right.
Uh. Right. Um. Another thing they mention is that Leland killed himself.
Uh-huh. They did say that.
A year later, basically. So that sort of semi resolves the Leland problem. But
Well,
sorry.
I was gonna say I wrote here Bob erased from past.
Well,
Like,
that's what I was wondering. If Leland was still alive for a whole year after, roughly after Cooper emerged, plus or minus a month from the Black Lodge, then yeah, was Bob in two places at once, or what you're saying?
yeah, I'm thinking that means that Bob wasn't in Leland when he killed himself.
That does seem more likely.
Yeah.
That it was along similar lines, maybe to what happened in the series, like that. Once Bob was gone, he remembered what happened and felt guilty about it and killed himself, something like
Well,
that.
and if I'm not mistaken, it was also a year. Was it also a year on the show between when he killed Teresa Banks and when he remembered?
Teresa Banks, yeah, yeah. Teresa Banks was a year earlier.
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
maybe that's what this is kind of going off of too. Like another, he remembers his crimes in a year.
After a year.
Yeah, it takes about a year for it to get to him to where he remembers and has to do something about it.
I mean, I assumed he remembered that whole time, but what do I know?
Clearly, he didn't. He was delusional.
I thought it was. I always thought you knew it was me. No, I thought it was that Mike's wearing the ring, and the ring reminded him of Teresa. Not to say he didn't like remember Teresa, if that makes any sense.
I thought the whole reason he's freaking out is because he's remembering all the horrible stuff that Bob. Well, see, this is operating on the theory that there's a wall between Bob and Leland, and then when Bob's in control, Leland's not remembering the thing that Bob is doing. The sort of plausible deniability of this sort of delusion, right? Like he's not really responsible for what Bob is doing. Now, I of course can't reconcile that with I always thought you knew it was me. I think that's just a better line in the moment, regardless of how the show has portrayed anything.
That line really.
Yeah, I think it, regardless of if it, you just have to write that line, like. So
It's like that Dogen Lennon thing from Lost, like just
uh-huh.
like running in at the last minute and like calling into question the whole plot. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It makes more sense dramatically.
Yeah, I thought the ring was breaking the hold that Bob had over him, and like the real Leland was sort of being tormented by sort of reliving what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
But it just, again, as we talked about, it's unclear, really, at the end of the day, the Bob Leland difference and when.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can point to, you can say that's definitely Leland. There's sometimes you can point to, say that's definitely Bob.
Yeah.
But who remembers who and when and where and how about what?
And there's sometimes where it's like not clear. Like,
yeah.
Maybe this is Leland, maybe it's Bob, maybe it's a little of both.
Yeah, maybe they're both driving the car. Maybe sometimes they switch the wheels. Maybe sometimes it's you can be you can be a passenger, but you can be awake, so you'll remember the journey. And maybe sometimes you can be a passenger and be asleep, and you won't remember the journey. So maybe like the horrible stuff, Leland doesn't remember off the top of his head, but maybe the more minor stuff he remembers about. So maybe there's gradations there about the levels of denial he's in with that stuff, and how he has to sort of deal with it was effectively a sort of psychic parasite,
right.
Battling his brain.
Right.
I wrote this down. They're talking about I believe this is talking about Sarah's childhood. And
oh yeah. I guess we pretty much said it, but the book does make pretty much as clear as it could be that that she was the girl in the
oh, did I bury the lead?
The New Mexico. Yeah, kind of. But yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much said it earlier, but like it spells it out in a way that the show really didn't. That she was there, she was in that town when that incident happened, she was in her room, she passed out when the thing happened. Like everything's there for like that to be her.
Yeah, they really. And I bet David Lynch hates that. I bet he hates specifying that, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was definitely not done in the show, very deliberately.
Yeah,
they could have easily called that young Sarah Palmer.
Yep. Totally, and young Leland or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And that would have made some sense too if they both got infected at the same time or something.
Yeah.
They both
That's
became
true.
hosts for this thing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
This line threw me just again. I don't know why, but them trying to shoehorn and make this work, because I guess maybe it's stated somewhere else that she was born in Bellevue, Washington. So
it could be the Twin Peaks All Access Guide or something. Yeah.
It says, I searched all the way back to her childhood in New Mexico, where the family moved months after her birth in Bellevue, Washington. And I was like, what does that mean? How do you move somewhere after you're born? I was like, what does that mean? Okay, she's born in Bellevue, Washington, but then she moved to New Mexico. Something about this really confused me. And I don't know what it is now. It seems like it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, maybe a bit contrived, but yeah, I think it seems like it makes sense to me. I don't know. People move.
Yeah, there was something about the wording here that confused me when I originally read it. I guess I made sense of it. But yeah, so this whole thing, the thing I wrote down was, let's see, after the page of the bomb, it says, two of the people named in that account lived in the Novaks neighborhood. Sarah was one of them. According to her parents, they found Sarah unconscious and unresponsive in her upstairs bedroom. She came around in the back seat as they were rushing her to the hospital. According to the newspaper report, emergency room doctors found nothing wrong with the girl. It was the same as all those others they looked at the night. The paper suggested it was close to a dozen people, and she was released after cursory examination. This made me think of the sick girl that Bobby saw in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think if that was some sort of callback to that. That I don't know. The idea of the sick girl,
right?
In a car with sort of like sort of being in a hurry to get somewhere.
Right.
Being sick. That's all I got.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. It's interesting that they didn't find anything.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow
So,
it was invisible to their
but
tools.
12 people got frogs in the mouth.
See, I don't know if we're supposed to think they all got frogs. Are we? Maybe we are. I don't know if we are though. Like they didn't show us 12 frogs. Like she was the only one they showed with the
We
frogs. Like they showed
saw
other
multiple
people.
eggs, but we only saw one frog.
Yeah, and they only showed the other people passing out. But maybe we are supposed to infer that if it was only see, I thought it was everyone who was listening to the radio, but this does make it seem like it was just certain people. Um,
So this also specifies. I think this was a super small town. If the book is right, the book suggests that this was a town for people, families who worked at the airbase. So right, I think it says
okay,
that. So this wasn't like a regular like small town.
okay.
Like this was a special community that I think would be like way smaller.
So maybe the
Uh,
12 were all the people listening.
so the 12 could have been the people listening.
Okay, okay, because that is what I originally thought. Um, but yeah, like the mechanic and like some
Mhm.
woman in a diner. Like, did they all get frogs?
God, that's tough.
I really don't know. I really don't know. Cause yeah, we only saw one,
Hmm.
and I assumed it was just about Sarah. You know, I didn't think these other people. I don't know. Like, is it just a side effect? I mean, there's just no way to know.
Well, yeah. What does that mean? Can Judy be in multiple people at once?
Mm-hmm.
Is yeah. I don't know. I don't. It's not clear what Judy even wants out of any of this. So,
Right, right, yeah, totally. She's even less clear than
well, because
Mr.
it.
C.
I mean, if you're telling me that Judy was in Sarah Palmer all these years, while the Laura orb was in Laura, I guess. And I don't know what Sarah or Judy wants, but it seems like they had it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confused about what they even are doing in the story besides being objects of Mr. C's desire and I guess the Blue Rose Task Force. But I'm confused. Yeah, I don't understand like what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What did Judy want? Why come to Earth? Why spend all this time? And it's weird too because I was fine with what the show said about Bob. Listen, they gave us the sense he was this like centuries old entity that had possibly unknowable origin. All that mattered he was sort of old and that ancient, and that he could inhabit people, and that we know from Philip Gerard that they spend time killing and having mayhem and chaos, and that at the end of sort of Bob's little part in the story, the main part of his story, he was inhabiting Leland and torturing Laura and Leland and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that made sense to me. But I feel like it's different if they're saying um, that he sort of came from experiment or something, because then it's not clear what he wants, you know. Because
Right.
it's like, okay, well, you came here for something. What'd you come here for?
Well, and then the book kind of walks it back a bit by seeming to imply that, maybe he's this Baal,
Mm-hmm.
Beelzebub, character that, that is also really old.
Mm-hmm.
And so it isn't that he was created in 1940, whatever that was.
But she's wrong about that, right? Because, well, we saw where Bob came from.
Did we?
Well, we saw something. So are you suggesting that Bob was around in the Sumerian times, and then he left, and then he came back when we saw Mother spit him out. The experiment spit
I
him
mean,
out.
it doesn't really make sense, but yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
This was Bob's second trip to Earth.
I guess so. Yeah. The bomb drew him back.
Okay. Um.
I don't really know why, but.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's the woodsman who got Bob to come back. So maybe they're like, oh, hey, Bob, the Earth's just set off a bomb, so they're ready for you to come back now.
Mm-hmm.
And come on back now. You hear?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's the idea.
So they're just like scouts.
Right.
They're like international or.
It's like the Prime Directive thing. Like I'm not gonna make contact again until they discover, atomic weapons.
That's it. It's a supernatural Prime Directive. We won't. We won't inhabit a species unless they have created nuclear technology. It's the least you can do.
Yeah.
When inhabiting a species.
Just had to wait. No. It's not time yet. It wouldn't be right.
Mm-mm. That's when they get the fire.
I don't care what the Romans can do. It's not enough.
Sorry, Romans.
Yeah, nice try.
They're like the next empire. All right. Anything else in this chapter here? I mean, they're obviously, we're not going into too much detail. There's a lot of little bitty things here, but
yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where, because the status of it is not clear, other than like it's Mark Frost's book, and yeah, it's from Tammy's perspective, so that limits it in certain ways. I do think it's somewhat insightful in terms of the thought process behind some of the storylines in the show, and so that's interesting. But, a lot of these little details, like, I don't know, to me, they're not real until, it reminds me of, what's that internet thing? Pics or It Didn't Happen. Like, until it's actually in the show, for real. Because I feel this way about The Secret Diary, too, and My Life, My Tapes. Like, to me, that stuff is, like, just kind of quasi-real. And so, like, the details of it don't matter that much to me until they appear on screen.
That's why I didn't really want to read Secret History, and I was sort of reluctant to read the final dossier, because when I think about what happened in the show, I don't want to be confused about what I read and these sort of non-quite canon things.
Yeah.
So it is totally going to get immersed in my head. I'm going to be like, yeah, remember that scene when Audrey had her beauty parlor and Donna came over and said, I'm going to New York to be a model. Don't you remember that scene? Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. I hope I can separate those things, but yeah, it's true. Sometimes it merges, and it's a corrupting influence.
I want to talk about the final thoughts chapter.
Oh, okay.
I felt it was, in a lot of ways, really excruciating to read.
Oh man, it was listening to it was.
It was just pontificating.
Oh my god.
To warp 10. And
out of nowhere too, like the tone was so completely different from anything in the rest of the book. It was like, what? Why is Tammy suddenly...
It's like she's dying or something.
Yeah.
It's like her she's like losing something, and so she's on the precipice of like these big questions, and it makes sense in the idea of like the work she put into this dossier, and sort of this is getting to the end, and now she's looking back at everything she's learned. But there's no like ramp up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is how the book is laid out. So you just turn the page, and she's just like
boom,
questioning like all reality.
Yeah.
What is the evil? Here's my favorite part: is the evil in us real? Is it an intrinsic part of us, a force outside of us? or nothing more than a reflection of the void? How do we hold both fear and wonder in the mind at once? Does staring into the black darkness offer up an answer or resolution? What does it what does it give us to hold on to? Does it reveal anything at all? I mean, that's deep, right? Um, so here's a part I thought was really interesting. I'm being facetious. It's not that deep. Um, the part I thought was interesting is it got kind of meta with in terms of what we were talking about with this book and how to place the book and how to place what's in the book. And the book is like basically telling us some ideas of what we should think about that. So it's sort of at the second to last page. It says, it says, Chief, this has changed me. You predicted that, and I should have known you'd be right, but you can't know what you don't know until you do. It's because you've already been through it, I think. Does this feeling end? Can you tell me you come out of the other side to some kind of understanding, or do I have to take that as another article of faith? So I thought that was really sort of telling.
Yeah.
After reading this, do we come out of the other side with some kind of understanding, or do we have to just take the things we've read as article of faith?
Right.
It just literally says it here. And here it is. Here it's like double down on the idea here. It goes on to say, "There's only one redeeming feeling I can cling to, provided I ever get that far. And I'm not saying that I'm here yet by any stretch, but when it's all stripped away and you realize you're the only one who can put the pieces together, put the pieces of yourself together by yourself alone. No easy answers from a book." Song or movie, or the reassuring words of someone older and wiser. I don't know, Mark Frost. Are you talking about yourself? I just thought, like, man, you just like really, you should have signed it, Mark Frost. It really, like, it just stripped away any sense of like you were reading anything but like what this book is.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny by the end.
It definitely seems more like Mark Frost than Tammy at that point.
Yeah, and just this idea of saying like, I don't know, just like the end of a story being about like, you just go and you say, I don't know if you learned anything from that story. You're the only one who can say if you learned anything from that story, and it's kind of like, I guess so. It's not up to, so it's like you can't be sort of criticized if the story was good or not, because it's just like, well, it's up to you to decide. I don't know. You're the only one who can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But then he says, one clear idea emerges from that crucible, forged as hard as rolling steel. We mustn't give up, ever. So it's like, keep theorizing, fans.
Yeah.
Wondering what, the truth is out there.
Yeah, exactly. Even though we'll never really tell you what it is.
Nope. But we'll write books about it.
And Mulder's sister might come back 3 times and it still doesn't make sense.
Oh man, they're making a new season of X-Files. So
I know.
Good luck with that.
The last one was so terrible that
it deserved another.
I'm not looking forward to the new one, but I don't know. I don't understand. Apparently, X-Files, they don't need more than a year to get a new one going.
They don't need 4 years. They're not like, listen, we'll be back for another season of X-Files, but it's going to take us 4 years to make, okay? Yeah. Can you imagine if they said that? Oh, man, that'd be crazy.
It would be crazy.
We need 4 years.
Yeah.
To basically negate the whole show.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'll just see if there are any more notes I had. Yeah, there's some more stuff about them disappearing and the Tulpa stuff. It's a little weird, but all right, cool. Well, nice to get this little bit more from spend a
Yep.
little more time in the Twin Peaks headspace.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, nothing really telling. Nothing really has fixed any issues I had or problems I had with understanding the show.
I think I'm gonna say that I think the biggest reveal was that the girl in New Mexico was Sarah Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other ones, I think most of the other ones were things that, I mean, that was a big theory, so it's not like that was like completely out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But it was only, the only reason it was like, oh, that might be Sarah Palmer is like, well, it's a girl.
In the right
And
time period.
the time period and the fact that what she's doing in the present.
Something went inside of her, and something's inside of Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was really it. Because there was no reason to think she was ever in New Mexico, and you can see in the writing, like,
Yeah.
she went to New Mexico. Just trust me.
Mm-hmm.
She was there. Because yeah, Mr. C being the billionaire. I mean, we had that one. Major Briggs' thing was a little more convoluted than we thought, but I think we understood the broad strokes of what happened there. The Judy stuff gets a bit elaborated, but not in a way that really says anything clear. And the very end of the show, Cooper's final mission, and so on. I mean,
they end up making Judy worse by saying, not only is it just like this old ancient entity or something, but it's actually some entities you've heard of before. Like this, it's related to stuff you've heard of. And it kind of makes it more like, and it. I understand the impulse to do that, to tie it into something we know, because it makes it feel more real or something.
Yeah.
But I think it makes it less special.
Right.
If you say this is a unique thing to this world that we're describing here, it doesn't have a parallel. You might call it Beelzebub, but to be wrong, like that's a
Right.
instead of going, whatever you've heard about Beelzebub, that was Bob,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just kind of, I don't like that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong way to go. You got to go in the more special route where it's like literature has never recorded this before. What we're describing here.
Yeah,
Which is what David Lynch does quite often. So, which is the difference maybe between him and Mark Frost.
Yeah, and in Gordon's monologue, he's like, he just says like, in olden times, he doesn't even specify where or when.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the way the show portrays it is more like it's a special thing.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily a specific thing that we know or are familiar with. It just exists in the Twin Peaks world. So yeah, I think you're right. They just have different perspectives on how to handle material like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it playing out in the book. And yeah, and I think that's, that's one of the things that, I guess there's what I want to believe about the story. And, maybe with his thing at the end, he'd be fine with my saying this, but, it comes down to like deciding what you, what you want to take as, the truth about the story.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to kind of dismiss, and
it's very Lindeloffian
stuff like that. I'm totally happy to dismiss, though. Like the weight I put on it is it's insightful about Mark Frost's perspective on the story, and I do think there are things that happened that maybe wouldn't have happened the same way if David Lynch wrote the whole thing alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's worth something to get that perspective, and that's what I was really interested in and kind of taking it as, because it's just not on the same level as a show. It's never going to be.
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's the kind of thing you know, I would only bother with if you're really invested in Twin Peaks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, otherwise it's not. You know, it's not. It's there's nothing essential there.
One thing
Um,
I thought would have been an interesting, as a really easy thing they could have mentioned, is just like what happened with Freddy in the glove after his fight with
yeah,
Mr.
yeah,
Off.
yeah,
Did the glove come off? Is he stuck with it forever? Like,
yeah.
the glove's job is done and he's no
Right,
longer super strong, or what?
right. Yeah, there's one casual reference, and that was it.
Mm-hmm. I thought that's the kind of thing they could have easily like had Tammy have access to. Like, what happened with that?
Oh, I forgot there was some stuff about James, um, where they explained like connecting the dots between James and the original show and what happened now.
Oh, okay.
I mean, none of it was particularly, but I guess that was in one of those chapters I forgot. Maybe that was in Back in Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
Wild guess. But yeah, I remember there's stuff about James, like he skipped town after he was supposed to testify against Evelyn, and then like he
Classic James.
like yeah, exactly. And then he wound up like I don't know, he wound up mixed up in some kind of drug cartel or something,
What a
and
go-to crutch. Jeez, everyone's in a drug cartel in this story.
yeah, you're right. You're right. There, yeah, that is a bit. This is a bit excessive. Uh, and I think that's actually when he has the motorcycle accident, and then comes back to Twin Peaks. Like there's some big incident or something, and uh, you know, after that, he's cleared of all charges and comes back to Twin Peaks, and I guess that's when he's quiet.
He's like, I'm just gonna be quiet for a while now. Let's see how that works out.
Well, although when we saw him, I would say he wasn't really any more quiet than he was originally.
I think he was normal, and I don't understand why they had that line.
He seemed pretty much the same.
Or something, and like he was like pre-verbal or something. Yeah. It seems like he was just shy around her or something.
Yeah.
You know, more than he was just like, you know, quiet overall. Or
exactly.
You know. James has always been cool. Legends never die.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, Shelley. Jeez, Shelley. Yeah, I, you know, fingers crossed for, you know, next season. It's nice that it's, you know, not impossible. So
yeah, it seems less impossible than this season was.
That's a good way to put it.
So, yeah. You know, it's not a guarantee that it'll happen, but I think if the right, you know, if the right things are there,
it's impossibility light.
Exactly.
It's impossibility with fewer calories.
Right. These aspartame.
Well, no, they changed the Splenda.
Oh, is aspartame out now?
Aspartame's out now.
No one uses that anymore? Oh man, you kids don't know what you're missing.
You're missing sweet.
Aspartame was way better than Splenda. I don't care what anyone says. No, actually it was horrible. The worst aftertaste. Splenda's weird. It's like plastic sugar, but it doesn't have the same kind of like funky lingering quality. Anyway.
All right.
Sorry, a little tangent about artificial sweeteners. Generally not a big fan. I think actually sugar's the best.
I don't think anyone's disputing that.
I think sugar is far preferable to both of them.
I think everyone agrees with that. Yeah.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
What is everyone arguing about? Why don't you just use sugar?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like, is there anything vegetarian on this menu? Come on, what are you being picky about? Just get something with meat. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back. We'll continue this Twin Peaks series if there's any more cool Twin Peaks stuff happening to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good.
So maybe there'll be another final dossier. The secret final dossier.
It'll be like Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Part 4.
Part 4.
Of 11 or something.
All right. Thanks and namaste. Well, you don't say that here.
Ooh.
It works. It works.
Sure, why not? Namaste and good luck.